John Jensen.
I'm here.
Good to see you, John. And Bob Walter.
Hey, good morning.
Hi, Bob. Okay, our first order of business is to approve the minutes from our last meeting. I've read them. They look fine to me, but I would like a motion from someone to accept the minutes.
I'll make a motion. John.
Okay, could we have a second?
I'll second it, Tony.
Any discussion?
No.
Raise your hand for approval of the minutes. Looks like that's unanimous, so that's done. Before I introduce our first guest, I want to inform everybody that public comment is encouraged in these meetings. Use the chat function or raise your hand if you have a comment to make. We will look at public comment as we move through each agenda item. So I will rely on Ken Witterham, our panel administrator, to advise if we have public comment to address before we move on to a next agenda item. So with that, I'm very happy to introduce our first guest. First, before I introduce Dana Souza, we did have Kevin Wayne scheduled to open our meeting today. But David, you might explain, he's been called away to Tallahassee or something.
Yes, he's been called away to Tallahassee. He has a early morning meeting there, and he is doing his best to get funds for the recovery of Captiva and Sanibel and the rest of Lee County. So to the extent that he needs to be in Tallahassee, he takes the initiative and goes. He has to get through Homeland Security and various security to get into security points to get into the Tallahassee, into the legislature. So he was unable to take this call. He sends his apologies, and I'm sure he will be at our January meeting if he's available.
Yes, well, he has attended our past several meetings and we've really appreciated his updates. All right, with that, let's move on. I would like to introduce Dana Souza, who is city manager for the city of Sanibel. I've been working with Dana quite a bit on the sewer project and our partnership with Sanibel to make that happen. And I think Dana's been doing a great job for that on this. And Dana, I don't envy you the task you have ahead of you and everything you've gone through the last 2 months. But from what I've seen, you and your staff have been doing an outstanding job. And I really appreciate you taking time out from your schedule to give us an update on the key things that are going on in Sanibel. And also, if you could address what the current thinking is about when the bridge reopening will be.
Sure.
So with that, I would like to turn it over to Dana Souza. And again, once again, thank you so much for attending this meeting.
Happy to attend, and I know that I don't know if he just dropped off, but Chief Dalton was also on the call. Chief, still here with us?
He was here and then he disappeared. I'll see if I can get him back.
He'll probably sign back on in just a minute, but I asked the chief to join the call just so he could also talk about security and how they're managing the checkpoint if we have any questions about that. But first, let me just mention, there he is, Bill Dalton. Chief, while you accidentally dropped off, I introduced you, so I'll let everybody know that you were joining us to talk about any security questions or checkpoint management issues. But Jay, thanks. We do have a great team in Sanibel, and everybody has been working really in lockstep to try to get our community restored to this horrific event that we've all faced. And it's going to be a couple of years at least for us to see full recovery, both economically, structurally, all the issues that we need to work through. I think I'll start just by mentioning about the sewer project that you touched on, Jay. Is we know that the county commission approved the agreement between the panel and the county to move to the next phase of that, which is to provide a study of how the effluent will be disposed of. So new wastewater coming into our system from Captiva, the effluent has to be, the waste has to be treated and then disposed of. Currently, we dispose of our effluent through a limited number of reuse lines that go to condo resort properties, or they go to golf courses for irrigation purposes. With golf courses not operating, we're putting more water into the deep injection well. And as we enter into dry season that we don't typically do, we do that during wet season. But that's what we have to study is with the additional effluent coming into the system, how do we dispose of it properly? So this study will identify those options and also identify the costs. At the January meeting, we'll have the agreement between the panel and the city like we did for the transmission study on our city council meeting, so we can get that approved and then get the study underway. Following that will be, once we have all the cost data, which I know I've been talking with David about getting an updated cost that hasn't been done in terms of what's the cost for the Captiva system on your side of Blind Pass. So then we can go ahead with the rate study and understand what the financial component will be.
Right.
That will happen after the transmission study. The county has already approved that money and we already have an agreement with the Captiva panel to complete that once all the engineering work is done. So we'll keep moving that forward.
Right, so just so everybody understands, you've got 2 studies you need to do. What are you going to do with the additional effluent? And then what are the economics? A study of the economics for Sanibel, which will then help us do rate, setting and so forth. So those are the 2 major steps left for Sanibel to complete, and then we can move on trying to get funding for the project, understand what that will be, and then I will then move towards establishing the MSTBU to pay for Captiva's share of what all these expenses will be after we get public support.
Great. Okay, let's transition. And I'm going to go over some of the information we provided to City Council at our last meeting, in case you didn't see that. And I'll start with the DOT bridge, is that we did have an update from Katie Sherrod, who's the project engineer on reconstruction of the bridge, both for the temporary repairs, and she'll also oversee the permanent repairs. We talked with her about what's the resiliency design standards that they're going to be looking at. And obviously they're going to need to improve what the resiliency of those spoil islands are. So what they know from Hurricane Ian is that the surge at the bridge was approximately 12 feet. And then the wave action was approximately 8 feet at the bridge and caused the bridge to be breached in 5 different places. So they're going through a variety of design options right now as they get moved towards final design in January. And then there'll be discussions with the stakeholders, which include Sanibel, Captiva, Lee County, in terms of what those options are. They will include both gray and green infrastructure. So there could be some construction of more T-groins that are on one part of the island, but they'll also be planting more mangroves and other plant material to help with the resiliency of those islands. Once they finish the alternative analysis, then they'll move into the final design and the permanent construction. I talk with Katie Sherrod about once a week, and I know that Chief Dalton does as well for the management of traffic coming on the island, because sometimes when you pull onto the island and you see how those lanes are managed, some of it is for our checkpoint, but a lot of that is so that they can manage their construction. So you'll see shifting of lanes in the upcoming months from one side to another as they start to drive sheet piles on the mainland side of the causeway. Right now, their goal is to have all the permanent work done by October 2023. As we move into the permanent construction work, they'll start sometime in January. We can anticipate that there'll be lane closures for some of the work, interruption of traffic. Sorry, there's a fly right around me. So that's just part of normal construction. They will, to the extent that they can, try to do that work in the evening. So from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. Is the goal that they'll try to do some of that construction work. Could be disruptive to traffic. Moving on to Island Water Association, you've probably had updates from them, but they did a phenomenal job restoring their system, and they continue to activate customers that are within the system, and been really great partners. LCEC, we have had a great response on Sanibel. I think you had a great response on Captiva as well from
did.
LCEC. And primarily their work right now is continuing to activate homes after we've got affidavits in from an electrician saying that a home is safe to be re-energized, and then monitoring the reinstallation of permanent concrete poles. So as they remove, originally when at one of our updates, their representative said that they didn't intend to use wooden poles. They were going to bring in concrete poles and just replace those that had broken with the permanent poles, but the availability was not there. So they had to put in wooden poles. And now they're replacing those wooden poles with concrete. A good portion of that work is done. You might have experienced the delays on Sandcap Road while they did that work a couple of weeks ago. Let's see. We'll move on to debris. So debris is one of our big benchmarks. As Jay mentioned, we're going to talk about what our plan is to reopen the causeway, but so far we've talked about a couple of our benchmarks, and I'll note those as we go along. So that we're not interfering, increased traffic on the causeway to the extent that it would not interfere with FDOT's construction on the causeway. Katie has confirmed that they expect higher volumes at some point during the construction process, and they don't anticipate that will affect their construction schedule at all. You might know that Periwinkle Bridge on East Periwinkle was also had failed, and not the span failed, but much like the causeway, the approaches to the span failed. DOT has completed those repairs, and that bridge opened on Sunday for traffic. There's still work that they're doing, but that bridge did reopen to traffic. So that's another benchmark that was achieved, that East Periwinkle Bridge would be in place. And again, with LCEC, that increased traffic, we didn't want to introduce increased traffic while they were working on the main roads. And so I'll get additional confirmation later this week, but LCEC has told us last week and the week before that they don't expect any increased traffic to affect their reinstallation of poles. On the debris management side, we have had a benchmark of 80%, which is substantially complete in the debris management side. Last week, they reached over $1 million cubic yards of debris that had been removed from Sanibel or collected and moved to our debris management sites. All of Captiva's debris comes to Sanibel as well. We work with the county to open a second site off Wolfert Road. And then debris also comes to the Island Inn Road. So they've increased the number of trucks to haul debris off the island as well. They've been sustaining that since Thanksgiving, so we can have some closure site on those debris management sites sometimes in March. But we've reached over 1 million cubic yards, which is 3-4 times as much as the debris that we saw from Hurricane Charlie. Very significant amount of debris that's been collected just on Sanibel. But the Crowder Gulf continues to give us updates, and early this week, Sunday, I had an update that they believe that they're just about at 80%, so they would hit 80% this week of debris collection. They are concentrating right now on West Gulf, East Gulf, and Middle Gulf, where we have had a continued push out of debris from condominiums and apartment buildings and some of the resorts that are there. We're hoping that will be substantially complete by the 21st of December. Let's see, just a note on the lighthouse. I think everybody loves the lighthouse, and the lighthouse we had to put in a temporary leg. You all know that we lost one of the legs on the lighthouse. We put in a temporary leg for Hurricane Nicole as she decided to pay us a late visit in season, and the permanent temporary leg has been installed. So it's a hardwood that's been installed deep into the ground, and then with also a cross member to provide sufficient structural support to that while we wait for the fabrication of the new metal components for that. I won't bore you with the details of our facility improvements, but City Hall is still closed. I'm working here at City Hall. Chief Dalton is at City Hall, but the rest of the staff is not here. We have not passed our air quality standards to have employees back in the building, and our contractor is working to achieve that now. I'm going to skip over natural resources. We all know that we are experiencing red tide. Just a quick note on that, and natural resource continues to monitor that. I will mention recreation because I know that Captiva residents do use the recreation center. That has been open for the last couple of weeks, and it's free for use, both for Captiva residents and Sanibel residents, Tuesday through Saturday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And this morning we're opening the lap pool. So again, from Tuesday to Saturday, the lap pool will be open from 10 to 4. We're going to continue to run that free operation for our residents of both islands until we can get our network up. And then we'll reevaluate that. But we're getting good participation on a daily basis for drop-in programs, use of the cooling center, internet use, free yoga programs are going on. And there is an update that goes out each week for a week at a glance, and you can take a look at that to see if there's something that interests you. And then on Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., we're offering free programs for youth. Our staff is there to provide structured activities for children. That gives parents a chance to get some work done at their house or go out and take a break and get something to eat, go off island, do some shopping, whatever they need to do. But we're getting a good turnout for that as well. And we are going to have a holiday event on December 17th, which is open to all of you on Captiva as well. It's Santa will be there for kids, Santa and Mrs. Claus, kids of all ages, Jay, so you can come and have your picture taken too. But we're also going to have an ice cream social. It's just a way for us to get folks back together who are on the islands and enjoy the spirit of the holiday season. Our building department, we have opened for permits, and our last count last week that I have, I'll get an update today. We were at 622 permits, and we are turning those all around within 5 days. Whether they're rejected because they're insufficient or they're approved, we have a new team in the building department who's working hard to make sure that those permits get turned around quickly. Our finance department, much like the county, we are going to open a credit line. We anticipate that amount will be a $20 million line of credit just to help us with cash flow. We're grateful that the state has agreed to pay for our debris removal. So that will save us a lot on cash flow, but we still anticipate we're going to need some additional funds to make it through this event. And we'll give council a briefing on that next Tuesday on the 20th, and then expect them to approve that borrowing at our January 17th meeting. Just a note, we did have a line of credit after Hurricane Irma of $5 million. It wasn't touched, so we'll only draw down on that as we need to manage our recovery. So onto the causeway. Chief Dalton, I think, and his team have done a tremendous job. They've had visiting officers from multiple jurisdictions across the state at different times since the event hit us. And I'll just yield to Chief and let him give an update in terms of what he's been getting from officers and deputy sheriffs to help provide security and manage the checkpoint.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Currently, we have about 30 police officers from a variety of jurisdictions around the state. And then we've got a number of sheriff's deputies here as well. As you all know, the sheriff's department handles all law enforcement on Captiva, but the sheriff has graciously extended some of his folks for our use as well. So we have a good, strong presence on the island, and we have a very good working relationship with the deputies on Captiva. If they have any need for backup or anything like that, they'll contact us and vice versa on occasion. We're all on the same computer system. The computers in the cars, they could see our calls that our officers are on, and our officers can see their calls. So our relationship has always been very close with the Captiva deputies, and this has been no different. in this incident.
Great, thanks, Chief. So the other benchmarks that we have before we would decide to reopen the causeway, as I mentioned, 80% debris cleanup. East Periwinkle Bridge has been reopened. LCEC has completed the majority of pulls on the main roadways. Police security is sufficient. And, you know, that's always going to be a moving target. But Chief Dalton believes that with the additional officers that he has right now, last week, Kevin Guthrie was in town for a FEMA meeting. And the chief had sent a note to his staff asking that the base camp be extended through the end of January. I forwarded that to Director Guthrie, and he announced at the meeting that we had last week that the governor had approved that the base camp for the visiting officers has been approved since to the end of January. So that's good for us. And Chief Dalton continues to work with the Police Chief Association in order to get the mutual aid here. A key component to that is that the state's going to pay for their overtime while those officers are over here. So that commitment is really important to us as well. When we reopen the island, the officers, we have 3 or 4 officers that are already always over on the mainland side managing the checkpoint. Those folks would be pulled back and be able to go into patrols within our community. And then again, I'm mentioning that increased traffic would not be an interference with DOT. They have confirmed that for us. And then we also know that we don't want to be an interference to businesses opening. And that has been, I'll just be honest with you, that's been a struggle in terms of some of the management issues that we've been faced with at the checkpoint. We have given out, I think, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but before the storm, you gave out about 4,000 reentry passes before the storm hit. And then since the storm, it's been about 15,000. Is that right?
I believe, I know that before the storm, it was about 4,000. Yes, and I know it's at least 12,000 since the storm, but I haven't checked lately, but I wouldn't have any doubt that we've increased that 12, a few more thousand. So yes, we've issued more passes than I ever thought we would.
Right. And he's been dealing with a lot of fraud as well. The fraud that he's seen most in the meeting that he told me yesterday is that most of the counterfeit or duplicated passes have been resident passes that he's confiscated at the checkpoint. And then we have given out thousands and thousands of passes to business entities that are either coming on to provide relief to residents, contracting companies, and we've been strict about that. They have to be registered with the state, with the Division of Business and Professional Registration. And if they're not, they have to go get registered. And that's offended some contractors who are coming in from out of state, but that's a requirement that we have. It means that they're legitimate, they've registered as a foreign entity, and they can do business in the state of Florida on a professional standard. So in order to get a pass, they have to be registered with DBPR. We've had thousands of passes issued to insurance agencies as well. We've had to create a process for that, and we have still have a staff member dedicated to that. So as an insurance, the mothership from the insurance company would have to send our staff person an email and say, these are folks who are coming in to legitimately review claims or do adjusting, or engineers now are starting to enter the scene to verify what work is anticipated or been estimated by a contractor for the resident. And so we've given out thousands of those. We've had businesses that are trying to open. We're working on with the hospitality industry now to make sure that their guests can get on before the causeway opens. And by that, that's another list that the chief is managing on site, either by having a list or by having the reservation that matches up with the person in the vehicle with their ID. We're doing Tony's online. We're doing that with Tony's business, and we have another on-island business that gave us some information that yesterday. But one of the challenges has been is we've given out 12,000 to 15,000 passes already since the storm, and that doesn't account for the employees that want to come back on for businesses that are opening or that they need to do a lot of work on site before they can open. So Chief Dalton's been creative with the finance department. Our deputy city manager manages that list. If a business is going to need 30 employees to come in, they send that list to Steve. He installs those, he verifies their need. And uploads that information to a cloud-based document, which is immediately available to the police at the checkpoint. In those cases, the employee would say, I'm working for Dana's Deli, and they would look up Dana's Deli, and then they have to show their ID. And if that name matches up with somebody on the list, then they're allowed to go through. If the name isn't on the list, they get turned around. That slowed things down at the checkpoint a little bit. But that's some of the accommodations that we've made, and without having to give out thousands of more passes or hundreds of more passes as businesses slowly start to reopen. Another accommodation that he's made is these mitigation companies that are larger mitigation companies by getting them on with vans or with buses and then approving them. Some organize each morning at the Publix parking lot and then come in. And so the chief has been working with those businesses as well. And then in other instances, if Dana's electrician has 20 vans and my vans are all branded, rather than give out those passes, then the chief has put them on a list that the branded vehicles can pass through. So again, as our recovery continues, it becomes more and more complex to manage at the checkpoint. And has the potential to slow it down now some can say, well, why don't you just give them all passes? Well, that just because with the duplication and the handing out of passes that I don't need my pass today, so I give it to somebody else. We're all trying to manage that well. So with all that, we came to the realization that January 2nd would likely be a date that we can apply these benchmarks and feel that we're going to be able to reopen the island for people that do not have passes. Now, I want to be clear what we're not inviting. Our beaches are not open. Our beach parking accesses are not open. There's not Christmas shopping. We're not having special events, although the farmers market is trying to find a location to open sometime in January. When we look at reopening, it's primarily to help the recovery. Some of the requests that we haven't been able to accommodate is subcontractors that are coming from out of state, or we've accommodated all the deliveries, but family members who are having guests who are coming in to either enjoy the holidays or they're coming in to help. They have 5 family members or friends that are coming in to help them move the refrigerator out or recover in some way. But we have not accommodated those. We've said you have to go meet those people over on the other side on the mainland and drive them in. So there's lots of additional requests that we have that we're not fulfilling. And so opening the causeway on the 2nd is not for the looky-loos, although we're going to get that, just like Fort Myers Beach did. And after about a week of looky-loos in Fort Myers Beach, those folks went away. And in my discussions with Lee County and Fort Myers, the town of Fort Myers management personnel, they still get some, but it's not an inundation of vehicles. We're going to get some of that, and we know that at the outset. But hopefully folks will know that there's not a lot to do here except to drive around and get stuck in traffic and look at debris right now, and that they won't come over. One other point that I'll make before I turn it back over to Jay is that we know that the county is going to reinstitute tolls on January 1st. There'll be DOT is still only going to allow 1 lane because of their construction. So as you come in, you'll have to merge down to 1 lane, and there'll be 1 lane, 1 toll booth that will be open for people coming on the island. And it won't be long before they shift in one of the typically the inbound lanes will be used as an outbound lane. So we're going to continue to see a shift of that. That's going to restrict the number of lanes that we could use for toll booths anyway. And then the 3rd lane that's for toll booth will be continue to be used only by DOT contractor vehicles and staff going through, so they don't have to pay those tolls as they continue their work. So that gives, in a nutshell, Jay, I'm happy to answer any questions. Chief Dalton's here to answer questions too.
Dana, thanks for that review. Very, very comprehensive, very informative, and much appreciated. So I guess your net is that you do plan to open the causeway to everyone on January 2nd. Is that correct?
That's where we stand now. We're getting an awful lot of input on both sides of the issues. we hear from people that say, thank you for opening it. You're going to help with the recovery. And that's both from residents and people that come on the island and do businesses, and then that do business, and then folks that also come here and visit. And I don't mean visit in terms of day trippers, visit that they have come annually for a period of time and they're looking forward to coming back, even though it's not perfect here.
Right.
But the city council will review this information as we move into December 20th meeting. And if they feel that there's a need to change, then we'll pivot. We've made decisions before, and we've changed our decisions based on what the reality is on the ground. We try to stick to the rational information. We know that I feel emotional about a lot of issues as well, but we try to keep that in pocket. If I start feeling emotional about an issue, thankfully I have Bill Dalton there to help keep me grounded.
Right.
But because we've also experienced that during this event, that's normal for us to do. But we're trying to make these business decisions based on what's best for the island's recovery. So December 20th, Jay, will be that point where if there's going to be a change in that date, we would know it then. But right now I expect January 2nd to stay the date that we're focused on.
Okay, and then I suppose if this somehow turned into some major traffic catastrophe, you guys, and it just completely brought everything to a halt, as I hear some people fear, I guess you could rescind that, right? And go back to the checkpoint if it turned into something like that?
We could. I think we'd want to see it, give it a chance to see if water finds its own level first, so we're not making a snap decision. But we know that we're inundated with vehicles anyway, 10,000, 11,000 vehicles a day during season. Right now, our vehicle volume is around 5,000 vehicles per day. We've had days where it's been up to 6,000. Those 2 days last week where we had big log jams getting off the island was not because of volume of traffic. It was about 4,000 vehicles one day and 5,000 vehicles on Wednesday. And DOT was doing boring samples and they had to be in the roadway. So they had flaggers with only one lane traffic in and outbound. And it really bogged us down. Chief Dalton has had continuous conversations with Katie about how we make sure that doesn't happen again, or that we get good information so we can let everybody on Captiva and Sanibel know what to experience on that particular day.
All right. Is there any public relations you can do, reaching out to the media or something that just tells people, folks, there's nothing to look at over here. Don't come here, or I don't know how you would do it, but just something that would discourage people from just driving over, day trippers and so forth.
Yeah, we will definitely do that, Jay. We'll have messaging that's out there. We'll have a signboard that will be out there that our beaches are not open. It's not, it's not opening for general business, but we still know, the mayor did an interview yesterday with one of the news stations, and it was to focus on what are the benchmarks. In her view, she thought it was to focus on what are the benchmarks for reopening the causeway for folks without reentry passes. And they focused on the 5 people that were arrested last week.
Right.
So I think they're on, that news outlet is now on probation, and we'll screen whether or not what their requests are for the future.
Right. Okay. Dana, that is a wonderful review. I'd like to open it now to any questions panel members, might have of you. I encourage everybody, while Dana's here, let's not get into a big debate now about, reopening the causeway. Later on in the agenda, we can discuss that and then give Dana a summary of any viewpoints, we might have, but I don't want to bog Dana down and, listening to everybody have an opinion on whether or not he should be opening the causeway on January 2nd. So with that precaution, I would like to open now for any questions that panel members might have of Dana.
Dave, before you do that, let me just say,
Yes.
my body has adjusted to the blood pressure fluctuations that have occurred during each and every day that I didn't experience before the storm. So I'm okay with the questions. And then Secondly, I also wanted to say that, you know, when we started our community briefings, I said Sanibel, Sanibel, Sanibel. That's who pays me. That's who I work for. But I did have some little birds chirping in my ear that said, hey, when you can you remember that Captiva has to pass through Sanibel too, and we all know that. So to the extent that I didn't acknowledge Captiva early on in the process, I apologize to all of you. You are always on our minds, and we know that we have a symbiotic relationship. So I've tried to make sure that when I have our community updates, that it's for everybody on Captiva and Sanibel.
Well, I appreciate that very much, Dana, and there are no hard feelings here whatsoever. We all understand the incredible challenges, you know, that you're facing, and you know, we wish nothing but the very best for you, and I really admire the work you've been doing.
Thank you, sir.
So with that, does anybody have on the panel have a question for Dana?
Tony does. Tony, you're on mute.
Okay. First of all, Dana and Bill, great job and great news to hear about how you had the deputies going through the end of January, if I understood that correctly. Is that correct?
Yes.
Good.
Go ahead, Chief.
Chief.
You want to answer that, Chief?
Yes, we're working on actually the nuts and bolts of the plan. The state has agreed to fund it. And now the Chiefs Association reaches out to other police departments throughout the state in order to fill those positions. And they've been great so far. And I have a meeting later this week to discuss moving into the new year. And I'm confident that they'll provide folks for us. And we've had some officers from other areas that have spent 2 and 3 weeks here. Not they've gone and then come back and spent like 3 rotations, so to speak. They see the need for it in the community. They appreciate the way the community members are treating them, and they understand that a small department like ours is going to need help after a situation like this. But that's why we're part of the Florida Police Chiefs Association. And again, I can't say enough about the sheriff. He's been right there from day one.
Right. Here's my other comment, and this is just a thought process, and you've probably gone through it. We didn't mention anything about the curfew. My thought process I had as a business owner and operational, if the curfew is in effect, I think it's a great idea, by the way, but maybe consideration for the curfew for people coming on the island, but not the curfew for people going off the island. And this is my thinking in terms of restaurants, not just mine, but any of them, or people going out. I look at some restaurants, they're closing at 6 or 6:30 because their staff have to get off island before curfew. So just in your thought process, I would like you to consider thinking about curfew coming on the island, but maybe extending the curfew for those people going off the island. Just a suggestion. And again, thanks for doing a great job.
Thanks, Tony. And I'll comment on that first and then let the chief, if he has any follow-up on that. So the curfew will remain in place. And right now we're anticipating it'll continue to be 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. And we work closely with the county to make sure that the curfew on Captiva is the same as Sanibel. I'm assuming that the county is going to continue with the curfew on Sanibel. But the county manager's office has been great assistance for us, and we've had great communication during this whole event. One of the things that's important for us to try to keep the curfew in place for people coming on island is 9 p.m. We are going to change that on December 19th. So what we have said is after 9 p.m., if you have a license that shows that you have a Captiva address or a Sanibel address, you can come on the island. We're going to pivot a little bit because we have more residents, seasonal residents are coming back to their homes and their license is out of state. So if they have their valid resident pass and they have their license that the police might check, then they're going to be allowed on after 9 p.m. And unless we encounter problems with that, that's going to be the process, but that will help our seasonal residents a little bit. And Tony, one of the reasons for keeping the curfew in place during the evening, curfew goes in place at 9 p.m., is that if the police, sheriff deputies feel that they have somebody that's suspicious, they can do a field interview, and the curfew helps them in terms of justifying that field interview. They might not have a pass that's displayed or something else. And Chief, do you want to add to that?
Yes. Even though the curfew is in place, we don't prohibit someone from leaving the island. So what it gives us the opportunity to do is stop them right before they get onto the causeway and just do a brief check inside the vehicle to make sure they don't have half a dozen TVs in the back or something like that. So my suggestion to council, if they decide to open on the 2nd, is going to be that from 9 at night till 6 in the morning, we move onto the island here and we set up a checkpoint here on the island. So your looky-loos and everybody like that, if they want to come over after 9 p.m. are not going to get on. And then that'll go all the way around till 6 in the morning, so that at 6 we'll open it up so contractors and everything can get on. But we don't stop anyone from exiting the island. We just try to make sure they're not taking things with them they shouldn't be.
Just one last comment, Chief. We are still stopping tow trucks, correct, that are leaving?
Correct. We're not going to change that.
Yeah, and that was because we had some reports of theft, especially in other communities, and the chief responded quickly and put up a checkpoint leaving. All tow trucks have to pull over, and then they have to show their proper paperwork, and the VIN numbers have to match up with that paperwork, and it's been very effective.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, I just want to, if you don't mind, Dana, could you just clarify that the curfew? I must be wrongly under the assumption that if you live on Captiva, we can go over the causeway and enter Sanibel after 9 p.m. I have on several occasions. I've flown in late at night. I thought this changed a month or so ago. My wife works off island. She leaves the house before 6 a.m. to get to work. She works doesn't matter. I thought that was changed. I thought we could travel after between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m.
If you have a license that shows you have an address on Captiva or Sanibel.
Okay.
If you showed that you had a Fort Myers address on your license, then the police would turn you around.
Okay.
And then what we're changing, Mike, is that, or Michael, I don't know which one you prefer, is that if you have a resident pass after December 19th and your license might say that you're from Maryland, they're going to allow you on the causeway because of the number of out of or part-time residents that are returning and saying, hey, it's real stressful for me if I decide to go out on the mainland and Christmas shop, or if I go to dinner, can I get back by 9, or will I have to rent a room in Fort Myers?
Okay, that's a great explanation. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
One question from the audience, someone who wants to confirm that purple passes dated 2021 are still acceptable.
Yes.
Thank you.
But I will let me just give everybody a sort of a heads up on this. Because of the thousands of passes that we've given out in 2022, generally those would be valid for a couple of years, right, Chief?
Yes.
We're going to have to reissue passes in 2023 at some point in advance of the next hurricane season. So as we have a recovery, then we'll have to issue new passes for that. So if there's an event that causes the causeway to be closed, when we don't have this massive humanity that has 2022 or 2021 valid passes that would have access to the island.
Jay, could I just say something?
Yes.
So first off, I just want people on Captiva to know that Dana Souza, the city manager for Sanibel, has not been the city manager for years and years and years. He became the city manager for Sanibel only a couple of months before the hurricane set in. And in the job description that Sanibel issued, they didn't tell Dana that there was going to be a hurricane on September 20th. And notwithstanding that, he's been working 24/7 to get Sanibel and us through this hurricane. And I think he really deserves our appreciation, and people should understand that. He did not buy into this when he took the job, but he has done everything that anyone could have expected in doing the job. So I just wanted people to know that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said that, so well, David. I'm just in awe of the work that Dana has been doing thus far, bringing Sanibel back. I can't think of a more difficult undertaking.
Well,
Well, thanks. And remember, nobody can do any of this alone. We have a great team. We have an incredible management team here on the island that have been very dedicated and leave their families home, shelter in place at the hotel, respond to the work. Our city council has been 1000% present during all of this event as well. So we have a great team, and we have great partners with the folks in Captiva Fire and the deputy sheriff that serve Captiva. They work well with our police department. So everybody is pushing in the same direction.
Right.
Okay, and
Okay.
the only other thing I want to add is that Jay and I spoke with Barrett Holmes, who's the supervising Crowder Gulf debris pickup. And Dana mentioned that on Sanibel, they would be 75 to 80% by December, I think, by Christmas on Sanibel. What he told us is that on Captiva, we're above that number, that we're above 80%, and they're continuing to pick up as we speak. And just in terms of benchmarks, everybody has water on Captiva, everybody has power on Captiva. I'm understanding now that Comcast and CenturyLink is just about completed providing internet service on Captiva. So in terms of those benchmarks, we're a little bit ahead of where Sanibel is because we didn't suffer the same destruction that Sanibel did.
I got one other question. Dana, do you know when normal garbage and that thing is scheduled to resume?
So we have Waste Management is on their routes, their pre-storm routes currently. So if you have a container, they are picking it up, and then we've authorized them to go ahead and pick up residential curbside recycling beginning next week on Sanibel. So I don't know if they're picking that up on Captiva. They're going to resume that service next week.
Do you know if we'll get new, somehow my recycle bins are somewhere, but they're not.
Yeah.
How do we get new ones? Do you know?
I think you would call Waste Management like you would generally do to if you needed a replacement cart, and they'll deliver one to you.
Thanks, Dana.
Yes, sir.
Ken Gooderham, can you follow up on that?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, does anybody else, have we finished all of our questions of Dana and the
We
chief?
should let him go.
Okay, well, Dana and Chief, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedules to give us this update. I think it's been enormously valuable to us, and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jane. We're happy to do that. And David and I talk periodically just to check in and get the pulse of Captiva, and I'll continue to do that as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, everybody, take care. Happy Christmas.
too.
Year.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Dana.
Okay, next, I believe we are going to move on to a update from Comcast. Do we have Jen Boyette, Senior Manager of External Affairs from Comcast with us today?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, everybody.
Good.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
having
so
me.
much for being here.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. Thanks again for having me. I appreciate it. I'm going to try to share my screen if that's okay. I have a map to show everybody. Let me see if I can get this to, oh, it says it's disabled by the host, but you don't
Jen,
necessarily
can you help
need
her
it.
out?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll keep talking and then I'll try to pull it up in a minute. But so services have been restored. And when I say that, it means all of our equipment is now functional. So if people are still down at their actual houses or buildings, that is because there's an individual issue at that particular location. So
Okay,
we are
this is
predominant.
throughout Captiva, services available to everyone.
Correct. We are 90% restored. Those 10% that are remaining are the majority of those locations are houses that are uninhabitable right now anyway and are being reconstructed, or they're obviously buildings and things that are not functioning yet. If you are like a high rise or a house, whatnot, there is a particular, and you're still down, there's an individual problem happening at your house. So what you need to do is you do have to call to get a service call. And it's probably the drop, it's probably the line that runs to your house, or it could be equipment issues that you're having. And you just need to have your boxes swapped out.
Jan,
So,
you can now share if you want.
oh, great. Okay, thank you. Let me see.
Hey, Jen, it's Jeff, the fire chief. So real quick, while you're doing that, I can tell
Okay.
you the fire station is one of those properties that does not have service yet.
Okay.
Most likely it's as you spoke of. I can see the drop is just laying in a giant pile next to the parking lot.
Okay. Okay. I will get you, if you want to leave your address of the fire station in the chat, I will
Sure.
grab it and set up a service ticket for you. Okay. And I'll make sure somebody gets out there. But yeah, so the map just shows you the ends of the island. And we divided it into 2 sections. Our main hub is on Sanibel, so we did have to focus on Sanibel to restore services because it all kind of branches out from there. So again, it's 90% restored. Again, the map kind of is neither here nor there now, since you are mostly restored, but it just kind of shows you how we broke it down and focused on recovery efforts. I do want to remind everybody that we follow power, and we are still running off a temporary line in some places and generators in some places. So you may experience the service coming back and then suddenly going down again. And that's as we switch off of generators or as other reconstruction work is going on. Sometimes we've run into, contractors or whoever accidentally hitting our line, and then we have to go and restore it again. But again, I just want to remind people that they should be serviceable. If their services did not come back up with our recovery efforts, they do need to call and set up a service call. We are going block to block, house to house, to see where is still down, where those drops are disconnected, and we are trying to restore those houses on our own. But if we haven't been to you yet and you want to go faster than that, then again, you should probably call. There's also the Xfinity app option. I know a lot of people have said there's a long wait time on the call and they don't want to be on hold, which is understandable. I understand. You can also get through to us through the app. And you can text somebody there. You can direct message through the website to get a service call set up. Or you could also proactively go to one of the Xfinity stores and switch out your equipment so that when your services, since your services are back up, if you think you're still down, it's probably the box. So you can proactively switch out your boxes at the store, come home, plug them in, and then you might come back up. Again, if you don't, it's probably a drop and you need a service call. In the meantime, sorry, I wasn't able to, when I'm in the share screen mode, I wasn't able to make this map bigger. So I'm not sure if this is doing you any good, being able to see it. I'm sorry. Oh, there it goes. Okay, before it wasn't working. But at any rate, we do have it. The Wi-Fi van is available. It is currently parked on Sanibel. It is at 2477 Periwinkle Way. It's kind of up by the orange marks there, not necessarily in the parking lot, but I'm told a lot of people are still using it while they're down. They're using that Wi-Fi hotspot. That has a 300-foot radius from the van, and it can service over 1,000 people at a time. So if anybody does need temporary service, they could reach out to that location and use the Wi-Fi spot from there. So yeah, I think that's most of my update there. Does anybody have questions?
So the net is, you're saying that everybody has service available to them on Captiva now.
Correct.
And if they're not having service, the issue is on their property.
Correct. Correct.
And,
It's an individual issue, most likely the drop, which is
Okay.
the line that runs from the house to the pole.
Okay, and they, to get that fixed, they just need to call in
Exactly. So you want to call and get
to technical
service appointment?
service or whatever it is to set up an appointment and have that fixed.
Exactly. And you could also do that through the website. You can direct message through the website, or if you have the Xfinity app on your phone, you could set up an appointment through the app on your phone.
Right, and Jen, do you have an idea what your lead times are now from the time that people call requesting service to get a technician out to service the property?
Yeah, I have to say in the beginning, we did have a lot of technicians down from other states. They have since gone home as we've been mostly restored. So the waits are a little longer, but it's usually about 5 days. So
Okay.
if you called today, probably you're looking at the weekend for somebody to get out there.
Okay.
But again, it's kind of the luck of the draw. Sometimes the guys get moved as they go, and they can magically show up at your door if they happen to be, if you call that day and we have somebody at the house next door, they might
Right.
be able to kind of hot change it, if you will, and you might get a random knock at the door as the guy's in town. But yes, we do have the appointments mostly 5 days out, and we try to come sooner. And we are actively bumping people up as we go when we have openings. If somebody cancels, so people are getting calls saying, hey, we can be there today instead of Saturday. So that's been happening. So people should kind of pay attention to those 800 numbers that come through, because it might be us bumping you up.
Okay.
Jay,
And
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Jen, a lot of the Comcast lines are underground, under the streets, and they pop up with cylinders at various junctures along the streets, the green cylinders. And a lot of the green cylinders and the wires that run to those green cylinders have been destroyed either by the hurricane or by the claw truck, et cetera. Are those being repaired by Comcast as a matter of course, or is that something that each individual house has to call up and have them repaired? Because if you go down the streets, a lot of these cylinders are crushed, and a lot of the wires underneath those cylinders are just strewn everywhere. So I guess what I'm asking, do residents have to call, or are you going down the various streets fixing those cylinders and fixing those wires that terminate above ground, but they're running underground down the streets?
Yes, good point. They do not have to call. That's part of our ongoing restoration efforts. We got everybody serviceable first. Again, some of those lines are temporary, so they'll be switched out for permanent lines as we go, but we did get them temporary as we just for wanting to get people up. But those pedestals and things will be fixed along the way as we go. That's part of our temporary fix kind of a thing. But yes, we are checking ourselves. We're going house to house. We're constantly out there switching those temporary lines over to permanent lines. And once we feed out of those permanent and most of that area is fixed out of that particular pedestal, they will replace the pedestal. If citizens want to call or email and say, hey, this one is awful looking, please come see it, then, it always helps to have a second set of eyes, and we'll add it to the list. But we are going around and looking ourselves.
Okay, thank you.
Jay, I have a question.
Yes,
Um,
John.
Jen, this is John. I met a guy a few days ago, Bubba. That was, I don't know if you know Bubba. He seemed to be in charge of all the repairs.
Okay.
And once he got us, he said, we're all set. I met him on the street there. And he said, I had to call Comcast because everybody was put in vacation mode because we weren't getting charged. So it was no problem. I got through. The guy was great. He said, give it a couple hours and you'll be up and running. So I had my TV up in a couple hours. So
Excellent.
And he also said while they were doing the repairs, they upgraded the Wi-Fi. So it should be a lot quicker. So.
Okay, that could be an individual. Yeah, our speeds are pretty fast for the Wi-Fi. If you had an older modem in place at the time, it's not necessarily upgrading the particular drop or wires into your house. It's more about your equipment being the next upgraded modem or whatnot that you have.
Okay.
But yes, regarding your first question, what we did was, because obviously nobody in Sanibel or Captiva was serviceable after the storm, we put everybody in suspended billing mode because we know you didn't have service. So you stop being charged. Once the node servicing those particular neighborhoods comes back up, they are, on our end, we're rolling those services back into billing mode. So I have heard from a handful of people, so you may have to call and take it off as suspended billing yourself. Some people do that as they're seasonal. They did it before, they went home in the summer and they have to reactivate themselves. If we did it for you because you're year round and we did it because of hurricane mode, then we'll turn it off ourselves. If people get a bill in the mail for time when they were down, you are not being charged for that, and you should not be charged for that. So if you see a bill or people see a bill for that, unfortunately, they probably do have to call to straighten it out, but that is a glitch. We will fix it. Please don't panic. And the same goes for equipment. You are not being charged for lost or damaged equipment. So if you see an equipment charge on your bill that is incorrect, some of those are coming up in places where somebody say turn their bill off completely and then move to another house temporarily or permanently while they're fixing their house that was damaged. And there's a glitch that happened in the move that showed that they didn't replace or return their equipment from their previous address. So we are seeing that on a handful of bills. So if you're getting angry citizens telling you that, I apologize, that shouldn't have happened. But if they call, we will make it right and fix it, and they will not be held responsible for those charges.
Okay, great job. Thank you. Thank you, Jen.
Sure.
Jen, what's the reliability of service going to be like? Are we going to have, outages at times, or is it going to be more like it was before the hurricane?
Hopefully it's going to be reliable, but yes, because you are still in recovery effort zones, especially with, all people's houses being rebuilt, there's still lines going underground and boring as people get new piping and other new lines. Again, there's still LCEC, We Follow Power. They're still replacing some of their lines because they restored with temporary lines as well. So as they switch over their permanent lines and we switch over our permanent lines and take things off of generators, you probably will see service going up and down and in and out. But if you had it on at your house, that means your boxes are working, the drop to your house is working. So if you go down again, that's probably what happened. A contractor or somebody hit the line, and if you wait for it, it will come back up. And we do price adjust if it's down for an extended amount of time. So people will see like a credit on their bill if that happens, if it's down for, more than a day or whatnot. But unfortunately, you might see it go up and down and up and, or, services go
Right.
up and down or glitches as we move to permanent restoration. But otherwise, you are serviceable now. And again, we will adjust those credits and things along the way.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, are we all being billed our former rates right now?
Yeah, whatever package you had previously is what you would be restored at. I will tell you, prices go up on January 1st in general, so you might see an increase then. So if your first bill comes back after then, and that's an annual business move, so sometimes boxes go up or the broadcast fee or whatnot goes up. That's like a FCC mandated fee, things like that. You might see a slight raise, and you can call and question and see what happened. But our bills are itemized, so you should be able to see what your services were before. They should stay the same, and then you'll see where it was increased. It usually says that on a sub line.
Have you considered waiting for fully charging us? I mean, we're on a generator outside. I'm down 2/3 of the day, maybe more. I have one TV working. I don't have full service, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. And I don't understand why would I be paying, full charge. And I'm sure there's a lot of people like me. And quite honestly, I don't feel like waiting, an hour to have a conversation with a tech to try to get, $100 back or $200 back. That's a real hassle. Have you considered waiting to charge us fully?
No, unfortunately, you can change that, but unfortunately you would have to wait because it depends on each individual house is different. Some houses are fully restored and fine and working, and other places don't need as much as you, for example. So you would have to call and adjust, but we will do that. We will change your services around and put you on a plan that works for you. And then you can change back when you're ready to be fully restored. But again, you can do that at the store. There's a store in Fort Myers. There isn't one on the islands there. But if you go to the store, you can do it at the counter. But if you don't want to wait on hold, sometimes it's easier and you get faster service at the desk.
In the store, is that up by the Forum? Is that right? Where's the store?
There's one on Danny Drive. It's kind of off Colonial there. And, where there's a big Walmart across the street. And there's a Hobby Lobby and a Chicken Salad Chick. If anybody knows the area I'm talking about, it's Danny Drive.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any other questions for Jen?
No.
Okay, well, Jen, we very much appreciate, you giving us this update. It's very helpful to us and we appreciate it very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Reach out anytime. Ken has my information, so you can go through Ken and he can find me, and I'm happy to update you anytime.
Okay, good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, moving on to the agenda, we're now coming to the sheriff's office update. Mike Zawicki, are you around?
I am.
Good to see you. How you doing?
Pretty good, thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
What's the status of criminal activity on Captiva Island these days? What are you guys doing?
fortunately, it's still quite low. So, but one of the things that I wanted to kind of jump in on is a couple of security things. I had a few questions over the last, I don't know, well, really throughout this entire incident, but over the last week, there was a lot of questions about what's going to happen once the causeway reopens. And I know obviously Dana Souza and the Chief Dalton addressed that a little bit. But one of the critical things is to mention that we do have additional patrol elements out here. We have for several weeks, and my understanding from my discussions with my chain of command is that that's going to continue into the foreseeable future. Plainly it's going to be assessed rather periodically to make sure that it's still necessary. But right now we do have additional sheriff's deputies on Sanibel and Captiva. Once by the time that reopens, we'll also of course have our regular complement of me and Chris and Christine. We're all going to be here during that time frame. And I don't know, probably a lot of you don't know this, but probably for about the last, I want to say about the last year, most of the Sanibel police officers are actually deputized as well through the sheriff's office. We did that just to make sure that it would streamline the process if we needed extra assistance. So if it looks like we're having any additional security problems, I mean, that's another resource that we have been able to pull from and are going to be able to continue to pull from. And of course, with the Sanibel Police Department and the additional law enforcement officers that are down on Sanibel right now, they're acting as a pretty effective filter against some of the stuff that would possibly be making its way up here. We are also going to be reaching out to the county parks just to make sure we have additional signage, additional barricades to let people know that those parks out here on Captiva are closed. I think having the parks closed and the parking lots inaccessible will probably reduce some of the day trippers. It reduces places that they can stop and get out and start getting curious about people's properties. So that's another thing that we're going to be addressing this week. One other element that we have out here is our electronic surveillance unit has been active on Sanibel and Captiva. And that's been a blend of stationary pole cameras and our unmanned aerial vehicles, or drones as they're commonly known. And one of the other questions that was asked of me this week is kind of what the panel might be able to do to assist in the security out here on the island. And I think, as always, the best thing for the panel to do is as a bridge of information to the community, and reaching out to community members to encourage them to take what we often would think of as common sense precautions, but sometimes we figure, well, it's Captiva and not a lot of things go on out here. But we do need to be serious about our security and kind of adopt a culture of preparedness and security during this recovery. We are going to have a lot of people out here that are unknown quantities to us, whether they're driving out to do a little disaster tourism, or whether they are, excuse me, I have an airplane going over, or whether they're associated with some of the recovery projects themselves. We've had a mixed bag as with the quality of character of some of the people that have been out here as part of work crews and teams. And, most of those people have been really great. But we've had a couple of problems here and there that have had to be addressed. So, to that end, I think it's important that we're taking the steps like locking our doors, making sure that no items of value are visible. Make sure to pull things out where they just can't be seen from the road. A lot of us have houses that typically you wouldn't be able to see from the road, where now your property and your house are kind of on display for people that are going by. So I just kind of discourage people from leaving things out that might draw somebody's attention. We want to avoid those crimes of opportunity as we have people moving around out here, and whether it's people passing by on the street or maybe people working at an adjacent job site, they see something out in your yard that appeals to them and they might make a plan to go ahead and grab it. So I
Okay,
just
so Mike, is the crime you're seeing primarily contractor people, repair people that are out here and they're saying things and then they come back later? Is that what you're implying? Is that?
Yeah, I know of at least one incident where I believe that's been the case. A grill was taken, and I think it was just the people from an adjoining property that were working and had been looking at it throughout
Yeah.
the time of their project and decided that they'd like to take it with them. We are fortunate that we've discovered two of our one was a conveyance burglary with a bunch of tools taken from a trailer, and another was the theft of a golf cart. We've recently determined that those are both unfounded. The theft of the tools was, as we had guessed at the outset, an employee who didn't have his key, cut the lock off, took the tools and forgot to tell anyone, and they didn't discover it until weeks later. He says, "Oh no, I've got all that stuff."
Okay.
So that was the case in the golf cart. One of the golf cart thefts was it was placed on a trailer by a removal company, and they just grabbed the wrong one. Again, it took a couple of weeks to get to the bottom of it, but it turned out that some of the incidents that we had turned out even not to have been crimes. That's not to say that we haven't had any theft or we haven't had anything walking off. And it's not to say that there won't be an increased chance of that once we have more people on and about the island. So I would also encourage everybody to check your security systems. I know a lot of us may not have full functionality between power and Wi-Fi and all of that. But if you're able to, make sure that your cameras and security systems are functional. If you need to schedule a service call for a company to come out and do that, now would probably be a good time, because we're looking at additional people being out here and having access to the island in January. So it would give you a little bit of lead time to get some of those things finished in time. One of the things that will be helpful also for all of us, and I know this might be difficult because labor is in kind of short supply, but do your best to vet your contractors. Google them, look them up, look at reviews. Don't be afraid to ask them what they do to, make sure that they don't have, a criminal element working on their crew. And it might just be a situation for many reasons where, you might want certain work done to stabilize your property and prevent additional damage. But you might be able to wait on certain other jobs. And that might be not only for the security, but also you might be able to get a better quality of materials and better quality of contract work at that time when it's in less demand. So I guess the summary to that would, don't be afraid to be choosy about who you're inviting into your home and into your properties.
Right. Mike, would it make any sense for you and Ken just to draft up a set of recommendations for Captiva residents, to follow?
I think I can come up with a short list and
and you could work with Ken on it, then we could put out a mailer on it to our entire distribution list, the recommendations you have,
Sure.
as we open the island back up, what people can do to minimize the possibility of being a victim.
Yeah, and one last point. Yeah, yes, absolutely. We would be glad to do that. But one other point, and I know we touched on this a little bit when Dana was talking about the curfew, and it seemed like a lot of the questions about the curfew were more about access at the causeway. But where the curfew really is very helpful for us is when we have people that are just out riding around the island at night. It gives us an opportunity to stop and see who they are and what they're doing. We've been stopping a lot of people coming and going on the island, including a lot of the residents and probably even a few people that are here in this meeting. And as you probably have seen that, if you have legitimate business out here, you're not being given a real hard time about it. We understand people need to come and go to live their lives and conduct their business. And so, it's not like we're looking to lock everyone up who's out after 9. But it does give us the opportunity that somebody is already in violation by being out and about. So we have a reason to stop them. They are compelled to offer to supply their identification. And we can make a determination whether they need to be dealt with for that curfew
Right.
violation, or if possibly they've committed an additional offense. So that has been a great tool for us so far with this recovery and kind of keeping things under control. So, I appreciate the community's patience with that, and would also
Well,
appreciate.
I
any
can't
continued
believe
support
people would
for
be
it.
upset about that. I would think we would appreciate that, you're doing that.
Yeah, from the resident end, we haven't had anybody upset about it. Everybody's
Okay.
been pretty good with that.
Mike, I have a question for you, because there is a little bit of ambiguity on this, and I'm not going to worry about Sanibel at this point, but in
Sure.
terms of the Captiva restaurants that are either open or about to open, it seemed like what Sanibel was saying is that we're not going to stop people from leaving the island. And it seems like you're basically saying you need the curfew as a measure just to check on people if they're riding around. I think it would be helpful, and I'm not asking for an answer now, but I think it would be helpful if you worked with the restaurants, or at least have communications with the restaurants that are open on Captiva, so they have a fairly clear understanding of whether they can have employees staying, for example, for a second seating in the restaurants, and then leaving, for example, between 10 and 11 at night. I know they don't want to violate the curfew, but they also want to be able to do 2 servings if possible. So
Sure.
there needs to be some clarity so they don't feel like they're violating the curfew, even though they are hearing that nobody's really going to be stopped from leaving the island. So I think just in terms of the 2 or 3 restaurants on Captiva, if you can work out with them a protocol so that they feel comfortable in terms of how they're operating, I think that would be very helpful.
Sure. As a matter of role and authority, I can't make changes to, that order that's obviously put out by the county commissioners. So if there's an exception that needs to be written into the order for that, then that's probably where it would need to be approached. If it's a matter of how it's enforced, then, we've already been applying a certain amount of reasonable discretion to that. But I think if you're looking for a way to codify that, some change to that curfew, otherwise, if they wanted to write in an exception for employees leaving the island or something like that, then I think that would be something that could be done. But as far as us enforcing that, I don't think that we would be looking to charge or arrest an employee that was leaving work and going off the island.
Mike, what might be helpful too is if employers would offer an identification as an employee. In other words, if I can give you a photo ID of my dishwasher and he says he's employed by us, if he gets stopped, yeah, he's got to have a license and not, but it might be very helpful for your deputies and you as well, because I don't know all my dishwashers. I know some of them, but not all of them. But that way it would expedite the situation and make it easier. But I agree with you, and maybe it's something that our people can do to approach the council or the city county commissioners to say maybe we can put a little niche in there, because it's not coming on the island. Mike, people come in at 6 a.m. We can still do breakfast. It's just what David said about either the second turn or the half turn at the end, where people might be wanting to leave that island right around 10, 10:30, or even 11, but they're going one way, and that's always off.
Right.
So just something to consider, but I'm going to make sure that my employees, we don't want to put any pressure on anybody one way or the other, but if they're running a little late or whatever, I think it's key that they get some kind of identification other than just their identification.
Right. And as I said, I mean, we're trying to use some discretion. We're trying to be reasonable. Our job and goal on this island has always been to help the community. We're not out here to just kind of have a pointless exercise of police power. You know, we want to make sure that things are running as smoothly as possible. And, you know, we obviously have to balance the security needs of the island with the needs of the business community and the residents. And sometimes that can be a fine balance. So again, I mean, we're applying reasonable discretion, but I would think if you wanted some extra exception codified in there, you would need to speak with the county about that.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about that some more, but certainly I think the county's open to thoughts from the panel. And I think that Sanibel also is. So we can figure it. We have a lot of time to figure this out. So we can work on it.
Agreed.
Okay, anybody else have anything for, oh, do you have an opinion, Mike, on when Sanibel reopens? Or do you have grave, or when the causeway reopens, which apparently will be on January 2nd? Do you have big concerns about that of any kind, or?
I think what we're doing is we're just going to prepare for a worst case scenario of a lot of people coming out here, and we will adjust downward or upward. Well, I guess can't really adjust upward from worst case scenario, but we'll adjust downward to kind of figure out where the right level needs to be with managing things like traffic flow and what have you. And again, I mean, some of the things we're going to do to get out in front of that are going to be making sure that the beaches are well marked and noted that those parks and access and public accesses are closed. And I think that will reduce, you know, just like in season, you know, there's limited amount of parking out here on Captiva, even when everything is open. And so when people come up here and find that there's nowhere to park and nowhere to go, they kind of make a loop and turn around and head back down to Sanibel. So it's going to be a matter of preparation between Christine, Chris, and I, and the deputies and police officers that are working on Sanibel as well.
I think we Jay for a minute. So, okay, anything else for Mike? Any other questions for Mike while he's here? Okay, thank you, Mike. And thank you for being preemptively prepared for whatever comes our way.
That's what we do.
Okay, next on the agenda is the Captiva Fire District. Jeff Powell, he's here. I see him. You have a report?
I am here. Good morning. I'll apologize ahead of time if I cut out. I seem to have gotten about half of this meeting so far. Some of you may have seen, I'm one of those that does not have Comcast or CenturyLink reinstalled to our facility. So, I'll try and get through this. Hopefully we get through. So first off, just want to thank all of the residents who have continually come out, stop by the station and support, you know, the amount of cookies and baked goods and whatnot that we've gotten here over the last couple of weeks, as I think put a few pounds on just about everybody that works here. So thank you. Appreciate every one of them. So thank everyone for that. Now to some more of the normal fire district business. So you mentioned as far as restaurants opening and whatnot. So as of now, the only two restaurants who are approved to open that have had inspections are Twin Waters and the pizza place. So if any other restaurant owners are open or plan to open, you need to have a life safety inspection prior to you opening your doors for business. That does go for all businesses in general, but restaurants seem to be the key that everybody's trying to get open sooner than later. So that's why I just touch on that. There are other commercial buildings that have had inspections, but restaurants specifically, those are the only two that have had their inspections done and approved to serve out of those. So if any of you are on the meeting, own a restaurant or friends own a restaurant, please make sure that that word gets around and gets done. So it's not difficult. It's easy to get done. You all do it on an annual basis anyway. So it's nothing complicated. Just needs to get done. We have had several fires over the last couple of weeks related to, obviously, to the hurricane. some related to AC units and electrical breakers and whatnot. Other ones related to debris piles. I'm sure most of you saw the big one that was on Sanibel last week or the week before. They've had a couple of their big fires down there in their piles. So we're assisting with those as well. Station 2 on Sanibel still is not being staffed by Sanibel Fire. So we are still responsible for running those calls on that end of their island as well. So if you see our trucks down there, that's why we're assisting them and running those calls for them as well.
Jeff, excuse me for a minute. Just so everybody knows, my internet is really funky right now. It's going in and out. So David, please be prepared to take over the meeting if I, get knocked off again. It's just going in and out.
I'm prepared.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Jeff.
Yeah, hey, no worries, Jay, but I made the same statement when you dropped off before, so it's okay.
Okay.
Currently crews are out flushing hydrants, so you'll see them out there. A lot of water is probably going to be on the side of the road here as we get through. We've got to get through flushing every hydrant on the island after the storm now, make sure they're all serviceable. Some of them had damage, some of them didn't, so we've got to go through those. So now that we've gotten that approval from IWA, all the crews are out there doing that. Debris being piled up on top of and around hydrants continues to be a problem. So if any of you have contractors that you're paying to move debris, please reiterate with them, do not put it anywhere near the fire hydrants. Some crews have been great about it and you can see huge piles and then a nice little path cut. Other ones, they've literally just piled it 5-6 feet high right on top of a hydrant. It takes us a long time to try and dig through a pile to get a hydrant. So, if you have crews out there, please remind them, do not put any debris around the fire hydrants. Lastly, if anybody is installing new or having to replace their gate at their residence or business completely, and you're putting an electric gate in, make sure that you install the EVAC module on there, which is Emergency Vehicle Access Controller. It's a little module that the gate companies, door companies, they all know have to be in there, but whether or not they remember to do it is another thing. So that gives us that ability to access your property quickly without having to go through a code process or get somebody on the phone to open it or whatever that case may be. So we have that controller in our apparatus that if we get to your residence or your business, we can open any of those gates. So if you're putting any of those in, make sure you get that done as well. Finally, that's it for fire department business. Just everybody have a blessed and Merry Christmas. And if anybody has any questions for me, I'll be available.
Well, Jeff, thanks so much for that update. I think you guys have just been doing a tremendous job through this whole disaster, and your community really appreciates the work of the fire department, particularly in those early days. It was amazing what you guys accomplished. So appreciated.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jay.
Okay, let's move on. Our next agenda item is Bob Walter, South Seas update.
Morning, everyone. How's everyone?
Morning, Bob.
South Seas debris pickup is ongoing. The week of Thanksgiving and the first couple of days of December, we had a bit of a lull where some of the drivers had left town, went home for the holiday, but it's definitely ramping back up now. If you're on South Seas, I think I mentioned this on the previous calls in our HOA calls. We've made the decision to raise some of our buildings that were considerably damaged and compromised in the storm. We are pretty much finished with that process at this point in time. We are in full cleanup mode as with everybody else. Most of the HOAs and we are also moving from a remediation position to more of a restoration position right now. A lot of the HOAs are going to be needing to replace roofs. There's a lot of work to be done. Let's just put it that way, as everybody knows. We're still targeting a late Q1 soft opening, which is the Point Restaurant currently. We're looking at Q1 open and then hopefully some more units ready to occupy
Bob,
mid-year.
And he can't hear us, and we can't hear him. Bob, you're breaking up, very difficult for people to hear you. So you might want to just start at where you said when you're going to be reopening, because you got broken up at that point.
All right, let me turn my video off. I think it's maybe needing up to my internet as well. Hold on. Can you hear me better?
Try now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
The opening, we talked last meeting, we're looking at doing a Q1, probably late Q1 mid soft opening, where the main marina and the pool complex, the restaurant in the north end will be opening. And David, by the look on your face, you can't hear me. Can you hear me?
Very difficult.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yeah, just keep talking. Just
All right. Q1
what-
soft opening, mid to late Q1.
of what year?
Okay.
2023. But we're just
Okay.
talking the main marina, the North Pool complex, and the restaurant up there. I mean,
Okay.
our HOAs aren't ready. Our third-party units aren't ready to take any occupancy yet. Many of the buildings are compromised. I think I mentioned, maybe you didn't hear me, but most of the roofs need replaced out here at some sort of level. Just a lot of work that continues to be done and still needs to be done. And I didn't want to bring it up during the Comcast presentation, but out here on South Seas, I don't know of anybody that's got Comcast up and running yet. I don't know if anybody in this call has Comcast up and running yet, but they may be 90% restored, but I don't think it's to the end user.
I don't know. I've got it, well, it had been working fine, it's just going in and out on me right now.
Yeah, I'm in the village and I have it, obviously, there's some online.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have.
Yeah, I have a call with the HOAs today. I'll double check that out here, but I haven't heard anybody that's got it out here. I may be wrong.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
Bob, are there any, there was a lot of raising of the buildings, the registration building, the employee housing. Has there been a decision of whether or not South Seas is going to take down the hotel units at the big marina, or were they going to try to rebuild those?
We're in the process of looking at both of those. There was conversations because there was some considerable roof damage there. We have we have 3 or 4 ownership groups. So, we're looking at both. Let's put it that way. Ideally, we need to get these units back up and running and get everything back to some sort of normalcy as quickly as possible. But we're looking at both options. I would say right now, if I was steering, they're probably not going to come down.
Okay.
That'd be the way I'm weighing right now.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody have anything else for Bob?
No.
Okay, well, let's move on to the CEPD update. As I understand it, Dan Munt is not able to be here with us, but John Reggert is going to fill in for him. Is that correct? John, are you around?
Yes, I'm here. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you for being here.
Of course. I'll try to keep it as short as possible. So our main update is we did the reorganization of the board yesterday, and our new chairman is Bob Walter. Thank you for taking up the chair, Mr. Walter. It's very appreciated. We've also got the lobbying efforts they're attending this special session and keeping their eyes on SB4 right now to see the outcome of that. As for Afton, our engineer, we'll have an update on the vulnerability assessment at a workshop. It doesn't look like they're going to be able to attend this Thursday, so we're going to schedule that for next Thursday. And the one inquiry that we've had the most is about the apportionment and the letters that have gone out. There wasn't a date on the letters, so we set everybody's date back towards to December 20th, because we still need to communicate with the tax collector when we collect the payments in full from the apportionment letter. And when we do that, what we do is we fill out a form and communicate with the tax collector to amend your bill. If you paid them already, as well as a payment in full to the CEPD, they're going to refund you the line item that was on your property tax bill. And if you hadn't paid them already, what they will do is amend your tax bill and remove that line item.
Okay, so if you double paid, do you have to do anything to get a refund? Or will Lee County just somehow understand that those of us that paid in full and also paid in our tax bill, will there just somehow, will they send us a refund or?
So that's what the DR 409A that I was explaining about, that form that I send out to the tax collector, is a request to amend your bill. So depending on the situation, you don't need to do anything on your end. That's between us and the tax collector.
Okay, so a check will show up in my mail at some point.
So what will happen is that they'll tell me that you qualify for it. We'll send you a form to sign, and that'll give them permission to release the check to you.
Okay,
So what we're doing moving forward is that we are looking into changes and on our office end to present to the board at a later meeting, a change in our rule of procedure, because we are stuck in kind of an antiquated payment system by our rules of procedure. So we're looking into what we can do to change that, so this doesn't occur in the future.
did that happen the last time around?
Yes.
The last beach renourishment?
I can tell you this has happened before because we have this refund process outlined in our standard operating procedures.
Okay,
So
so
there's
when
no reason why we should be
I
having a
paid in full
refund.
my last, the last beach renourishment bill I got, I paid that in full. So I guess I just double paid that then on my taxes. Every year my taxes had a pro rata share of that and I paid them in full.
The timing's not really helping of how the letters went out a little bit before the storm, so a delayed payment or delayed delivery to everybody. So the timing of everything got kind of pushed together with the letter going out and the tax collector sending out their notice as well.
Jay, at the last beach renourishment, I paid in full and I did not see the 7-year amortization payments on my tax.
Okay, so
I don't think it happened at the last.
You won't see them moving forward.
Yeah. I don't think it
okay,
happened. It was the timing of when they did the beach renourishment and the combination of the hurricane occurring at the same time that created a glitch at this point.
Yeah, but this is a old system that we need to update. There was no reason why we shouldn't be able to communicate this right away with the tax collector other than through a form that you paid. And there's solutions that we're looking at to be presented to the board in the future.
okay.
John, I had one question from the audience. So you didn't pay the full item? If you didn't pay in full, the line item will be amended. What date would that occur?
At this point, it's in the tax collector's hands. I can't speak for them as to how fast they'll turn that over. My last communication with them was yesterday, and they said they have a clerk working on it.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, anything else for John Riegert?
Yeah, I do have one question. Hi, John.
How you doing?
Hey,
Good to see you, Mr.
Could
Lanigan.
you or Bob explain what your procedure is in the event of a fish kill due to red tide? I know it seemed like you did a really good job a few weeks ago when we had that fish kill. Can you describe your policy, your procedure, and when we can expect that sort of action if something like that happens in the future? Is there a threshold that has to be met before you engage?
We basically are communicating with FWC and Lee County, and we don't have the resources to put out a cleanup effort. And it's sorry, I was more geared up for the apportionment issue than the red tide issue. But mainly it's about communicating with the government authorities, with FWC and Lee County, and they aid with the cleanup efforts.
So you're saying that the CEPD is in no position to clean up after a fish kill by itself? Is that what you're saying?
We don't have the equipment to do so.
Well, that's concerning.
Michael, just to let you know, the VCB in its beach, in its beach management has funds depending on the severity of it, and they do have the equipment to clean up that stuff. But it has to come out of the VCB via I think it's got to still go through the county commissioners. But the VCB does have funds available in their beach and shore thing for cleanup and the equipment. But it has to be so severe that they can do it, because they've done it before and they do have the equipment.
Correct, and the county is the one that did it in the last cleanup 2 weeks ago. We communicated with them that we had a heavy kill out on the beaches, and we coordinated, and they came out for about a week. Actually, I think they started along the Sweetwater stretch and then went north south.
Yeah.
I mean, the equipment to do this is large equipment. I mean,
yeah, we're not getting out there with our hands to pick up contaminated fish carcasses, because they're, red tide, as we know, presents a neurotoxin. So we've got to
thank you, John, for that explanation.
Scale.
Maybe you could, at the next meeting, Bob, you can make an agenda item to have an actual procedure for this, and not sort of like, to have an actual, sort of description on how big the fish kill has to be. I remember when I was on the CEPD, it was some absurd thing about bigger than a Volkswagen. It was crazy. It was really unprofessional. And I think that we need to have a better answer for this question, particularly with the concern after the post-hurricane experience that we've had in the past and we had just last month.
Well, again, Michael, just so you know, the equipment is owned by Lee County. And it is, and they have the funds to do it. I don't know. I'm novice to this, whether CEPD should even be involved in this.
Yeah, we don't have a program
to
do it
CEPD
ourselves.
Could maybe make the recommendation to the county commissioners and to the Visitor Convention Bureau as to what the volume should be, maybe something along those notes.
Which is what the current process is.
Thank you.
Would you just send me an email with that process, John? I'd like to read it.
Mike,
Yes,
I'm a
sir.
little confused. I thought you started this conversation out saying that on the last kill, you were impressed by the cleanup.
I was. I just
Okay.
want to know what the process is. Bob, as you know, I sat on the CEPD and I thought it was a very dysfunctional group. And I'm really hoping that it'll become better. But, this response doesn't really give me great confidence in a specific procedure that we did not have when I was on the CEPD. And I don't think it sounds like we have one now, other than to call the Visitors Convention Bureau.
Well, it was 2018, after the big kill, is when the VCB decided to buy that equipment. So we really didn't have that position to be able to assist beaches in anywhere in Lee County, whether it's up at Gasparilla or down by Bonita. So it has to, I think, I don't know, I'm not on the CPD, or I never have been, but I would think that just the recommendation, they won't let me on. Anyways, that's okay. But that's basically, I think, in the procedural thing, it's make the recommendation to the Visitor Convention Bureau.
We could certainly document a procedure, John.
Yes, sir. I'll retrieve it for you and I'll present it. I'll get you the procedure in an email.
Thank you.
Hey, John, is the CPD office open on Andy Rossi?
We haven't been utilizing it at this point because of the instability of service out there. I have to be able to communicate with the county and the residency on a regular basis via email. So until now, we're getting service back. We haven't had the office open. No.
Is there a good number if I have a question to call you or whoever about a tax bill?
So the office phone is running. I returned calls from the voicemails that are left.
Okay.
And because the load we've had in the office with the apportionment issue has been great.
Okay. What's that? 472?
It's 472. Shoot, let me look it up for
That's
you.
all
It's
right.
been quite a
That's all
while
right.
since I've actually had to call the office.
I'll get it. That's okay. I
Okay,
got it. Thank you, John.
of course.
John, can you just give us a 1-minute overview of the discussion about restoring all the last sand from Ian?
The best I can do is to let you know to attend next Thursday's workshop with the engineers. They're going to overview the vulnerability assessment that they performed.
You want me
And
to?
I'd rather you have the information from our engineers than me try to interpret that for you.
Well, we've had a post-storm survey done, which compares to the restoration to show exactly how much we've lost. And they're going to present that at this workshop. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go out to the state and the feds and seek compensation to replace as much of that as possible, if not all of it.
Okay, thanks, Bob. That's what I was looking for. Okay, anything else for CEPD?
No.
Okay, well, I suggest we take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
I know I need one, so everybody be back in 5 minutes, please. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Ken, have you ready to go again?
I am.
Good. Well, let's get started. I guess people start filtering back in. Up next, I guess, David Mintz, you have a number of topics to cover.
I do. I have a number of topics, plus one topic that we're going to need a motion on.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go through them one by one. First, just so that people understand, I think we're slated in terms of the bridge repairs, the final bridge repairs. My understanding is that Ken has set up the meeting set up an interview or a report at our January meeting with the FDOT engineer that's in charge of repairing the bridge. And she's going to be available at our January meeting to give an update
Great.
on what they're going to do for the bridge and what they're not going to do for the bridge in terms of resilience. So she will actually be at our meeting in January. Okay, that's number one. Number two, Verizon, and Verizon was I told them that our cell service with respect to Verizon had deteriorated and they were going to send somebody up to do some adjustments. I can say, I don't know if it has to do with them, but my service has improved, my Verizon cell service over the last couple of days. And I don't know if people experience that, but hopefully they have. That's number two. Number three, we had, there were a lot of flies or gnats on the island that people, I don't know if they've noticed it, but they were on Sanibel and Captiva.
I've noticed it in spades.
We contacted the county and the county has agreed to spray the island to try to mitigate the gnats and flies that are on the island. And my understanding, based on what I saw last night, they were spraying all down the streets of Captiva last night. So that we made a request and the county responded almost immediately. And so I think that's a good thing. Hopefully we see a difference. Next, I just want people to know that well, first, let me just say this. People have been asking me about FEMA and whether FEMA is going to continue to pay for debris collection because they've been reimbursing the county 100% for the debris collection, and they've been getting extensions on the FEMA full reimbursement at 15-day intervals. But my understanding is even if it doesn't get reinstated or renewed every 15 days, the reduction of the FEMA contribution would not disappear. It would just be reduced maybe from 100% to 90% or then to 80% over time. And Crowder Gulf will continue to do their collections on Captiva until all the debris is gone. So we don't have to worry about the county is negotiating with FEMA and the state about reimbursement, but Crowder Gulf is not going anywhere. And they're going to continue to pick up the debris and do pass after pass after pass until it's all. Next, there is a bill now pending in the Florida State Legislature. It's Senate Bill 4A. What that bill does, and it's likely to pass, what that bill does is give Captiva residents an opportunity to apply for a reduction in their property tax for 2022, which means if your house was uninhabitable or was caused to be uninhabitable by the hurricane, you can apply between January 1st and April 1st for a reduction in your 2022 property taxes. And that reduction, according to the bill at this point, will be calculated based on the number of days it was uninhabitable over 365. Those are the number of days in a year. So if your house was uninhabitable from October 1st through the end of December, for whatever reasons, you will have a 90 over 365 or a 25% reduction in your tax bill for 2022 if you do the application between January 1st and April 1st. Okay, if it was uninhabitable for 1 month, it would be 30 over 365. And that percentage would be applied if you make the application. So that bill has not been passed yet, but it's pending and we should know whether it gets passed within the next couple of days. Okay.
But my understanding, David, is that uninhabitable means your house, you could not live in it because it was not fit to live in. It doesn't have anything to do with the fact that the causeway wasn't open, you didn't have utilities or anything like that.
I heard that interpretation at CEPD that it had to be a structural damage to the house. That's not what the language says, actually.
Oh, okay.
It says it was caused to be uninhabitable by the hurricane or by structural damage, or so it was not and, it's or. So therefore, what it means for your house to be uninhabitable caused by the hurricane is unclear at this point, but doesn't require structural damage. Let's put it that way. So
okay, so there's a chance that the fact that you couldn't live in your house because there was no water, no electricity.
Right.
That you may be able to get a tax refund.
That is correct. And that'll become clear. But clearly, if your house was gutted or you had serious water damage or your roof was leaking and you couldn't get back in, clearly you would be covered with that. But it doesn't require, as I read it, structural damage. It was uninhabitable caused by the Hurricane Ian.
David, two questions from the audience. One, is that tax break for year-round Florida residents only? And two, if it passes, how do people find out how to apply?
Okay, well, we will let you know at the panel meeting if it passes. So at the January panel meeting, we'll have more clarity on that. I did not read the whole piece of legislation. So I don't know if it only applies to Florida residents, but I don't think so. I mean, this is just a guess. I think it's anybody who pays property taxes, but we will check that out and I will look at it.
David, I'm sorry, but I thought there was a homestead portion in there.
If there is, then I didn't see it and it may be.
Okay.
So we will clarify it and we will do a summary of the bill and we'll put it on the website so people can see it. Okay, what was the other question?
Well, how to apply, but we'll deal with that when we see the final bill.
Right, when we see the final bill, we'll figure out how to apply. Okay, the last thing that I want to report on is iguanas. Notwithstanding the hurricane, the iguanas have survived and they are plentiful. And in discussions with the county has, Kevin Ruane, working with the county, has agreed that if Captiva Community Panel retains and hires Alfredo, our iguana trapper, shooter, whatever, for a year, for the known fee of $25,000, they will reimburse us, the Captiva Community Panel, for retaining our iguana person. So I think position today to have John Jensen meet with our iguana trapper, Alfredo, and I know he has a plan, but to engage him for the next year to deal with our iguanas on Captiva, and we will get reimbursed. So it was always $25,000 for a year, whatever the $25,000 covers. We can ask you, John, to arrange for that, to get a contract done with him. We will then submit an invoice to the county, and they will reimburse the panel in the amount of $25,000 for starting next week or whenever Alfredo starts. So if that's agreeable to the panel, we can have a motion which basically allows the Captiva Community Panel to engage and retain Alfredo as the iguana trapper for Captiva for a 12-month period in the amount of $25,000 to be reimbursed to the Captiva Community Panel by the county.
Okay. We would take it out of our funds, Dave?
We would take it our funds, and once we do that, we would then either send an invoice to the county on an annual basis, depending on how Alfredo gets paid. But if he gets paid on a monthly basis, we can send an invoice to the county on a monthly basis.
Okay.
County in advance. But there's no question that the county will reimburse us for the funds that the panel will expend to hire Alfredo at this point.
Okay. All right. You
All right,
made the motion.
Yes, I just want to also comment that we have plenty of cash, to pay him. And so it's not going to be a cash flow issue for us, to do this. So with that, I'd like to call for a motion.
Jay?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Ken.
Comment. I've met Alfredo several times, and he carries around a very high-powered pellet gun. But he stands there for a period of time and waits to see if there's an iguana that shows up. If not, he just moves on to another property. This sounds like a program, John, that isn't going to have any long-term success. I know he bags a number of them a day, but I'll tell you, he misses more because he doesn't see them. Isn't there any other system that we could initiate that would have more long-term success?
I think Alfredo, being the expert, this is the best way that he could do it. But I think like right now with no hardly the way the vegetation is, and not many people on the island, now is the time to go in and start, getting rid of them. But what he'll do is he goes to these properties, and when he finds out where most of them are, the iguanas, they congregate in a certain area, he'll keep going back to that area. And he has a program where, I see him when he was coming out before, I mean, he would have a whole truckload of them.
John, I don't disagree with what you're saying. In fact, I think he's very competent. I
Yeah,
just think the system needs some improvement. Not Alfredo, but isn't there a better way to macro control this problem? Because he's probably bagging as many as they reproduce. I mean, he's bagging half of what they're reproducing because they reproduce, as you know, very fast.
yeah.
I'm just looking for a long-term solution. Maybe there's not one. I'm just asking a question.
No, I mean, that I'm sure everybody's looked at it. I mean, Marco Island does the same thing. Sanibel does the same thing. Boca Grande does the same thing. They have the same trappers, and they're just, you can't put out a poison. You can't put out traps.
Why can't you, I don't know. There's got to be this is not against Alfredo at all. I think he's a very competent person.
Yeah.
It seems like somebody's got to research a better solution.
Like the big picture. Well, I'll ask Alfredo, if there's a better way, but as far as I know, this is it.
Frankly, the better way is more of a science approach. It's a reproduction thing. You might want to reach out to the University of Florida. Seriously.
Yeah. There you go, Bob.
That's what they do. That's, mosquitoes, iguanas, but I mean, they reproduce at such a rapid rate. It's all about the reproduction.
Yeah. Look at the big picture. Okay. I
don't think the reproduction of iguanas we can keep up with.
Yeah.
I think Bob Walter wants contraception for iguanas. I don't
I'm already working on the labeling.
Okay, John, would you, I know that Alfredo was putting together a plan for Captiva with certain elements in it. Could you, for the next meeting, just have him and you work on it if you can, submit the plan to us so that at least we can review what his strategy is and how he's going to do it and how he's going to contact properties. So we know exactly what he's going to do going forward. And so we can explain it to the county when we submit the invoice.
Yep. Would you like me to have Alfredo at our meeting on Zoom?
John, I can't. I like Bob's approach. That's more scientific. And I'll be glad to work with you. I don't know anybody at Florida State or University of Florida. My next door neighbor went there. I just think we have to research a longer term solution. And I'm not sure Alfredo is the man long term. I think it's more of a scientific issue.
Hey, Ken, Jay, I agree with the point you're making, but I think if there was a better solution that, other communities would be implementing it. And I don't know anybody that's doing anything differently.
Well,
I think an Alfredo type effort, but maybe
I think that's a point, Jay, and I concur, and I would vote for the resolution with Alfredo for the year. But I also agree with Bob that I think we need to long term take a look at this scientifically.
Yeah,
maybe nobody else has.
Yeah, right.
Well, except think about rats too. And
why do I want to think about rats?
I want to think about rats. Well, neither do I use. And the issue we have there is we put out poison for rats, which we try not to kill anything with else. So I guess my point is that sending John off to try to find it is a long shot. And if he wants to do it, hallelujah. But I think the probability of success is extremely low.
Yeah, and Linda, I think it's probably been looked at. I would assume it's been looked at. So it might be easy to find what the research found. So I'll look into it. I'll look at the big picture. But
John, if you need any help, I'll be glad to help.
all right, thank you. Thank
And
you.
I do have rat traps around my house, but they have not been successful, which is probably, hopefully, that means I don't have any rats. But
And John, when you're talking to Alfredo, would you ask him, it's been a couple of years since we asked for permission to go on properties. Do we need to redo that, or does it still stand?
Okay, all right. I know he still has the list, so yeah, I'll ask him, Ken. Yeah. And
Okay.
So
And meanwhile, while we figure out the long-term solution to this problem, there's a motion on the floor.
I would like to make the motion. I don't think we have it. I would like to move that we approve $25,000 funding for Alfredo to go forward to be paid back by Lee County for iguana control.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hands. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you.
David, do you have anything else?
No, nothing specific in terms of updates.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the causeway reopening. I think we got a good explanation of the rationale for it from Dana Sousa today. I know that a lot of us have been getting feedback from, around our neighbors that, they don't like the idea of this. I know, Bob Walter, you have grave concerns about it. I don't know. I guess where I stand is that, I'm in favor of, being supportive if they want to reopen on January 2nd. I think, we need to get the businesses, going again to the best we can. And I think we want to make it easier, to have our house guests and so forth, over the holidays. And, if it turns into a disaster, Dana Sousa said, they could re-implement it if they need to, closing off the causeway again. So that's my view. Does anybody else want to speak on the matter? I can present a summary of the thoughts here to Dana for his consideration, if other people have other views on this.
Well, I asked for this to be placed on the agenda just because I was approached by a number of homeowners out here saying, why? Just because there's nothing to do, there's security concerns, et cetera, et cetera. I think Dana did a great job today, just overviewing exactly the thought process. And I think he's right. I think you get this wave of the first week to 10 days where you might have more traffic than not. But then when people do realize there's nothing to do out here, then they just don't come out. So
right.
I walked away from Dana's presentation to say, hey, you know what? Give it a chance.
Yeah, that was my feeling also. Does anybody else have a counter point of view?
I don't think.
There was a comment yesterday in the CEPD meeting after I had heard that it was going to be opened. I was trying to push to let's open our parking lot to support whatever everybody else was doing. I think that's a mistake, and I think we should keep the parking lot closed until we get some other, to try to discourage day tripper type people.
Right, I agree with that.
Okay, this is one of the things that sort of kept me up at night a little bit. And I recognize for a lot of people on Captiva, it's difficult and complicated. But in the end, I think what's best for the recovery of Captiva and Sanibel is what's most important. And I mean recovery, not just for residents, but recovery for businesses. And I think it's important we put our position on the record if we have one. And, I sort of broke it down into pros and cons. And the pros are there's more customers as businesses struggle to open and survive. It allows for friends and family to visit and provide support to people who suffered damage. It allows for unimpeded help to people needing to rebuild their homes and for rebuilding assistance. It allows, and this was important to me, it allows for creative solutions that can't be anticipated if you let people on the island, and allows hopefully an explosion of energy by people who have new ideas about how to recover. And the other thing that occurred to me is we have contractors, craftsmen, landscapers, public adjusters, roofers, and lumber yards, many off-island businesses that are doing well and making money as part of the recovery. And I thought maybe we have to help our island businesses to also have that opportunity to succeed. And that includes rental houses and even rental agencies. So those are the pros. The cons are traffic. It'll be harder for people, contractors, to get here at times. It'll be backed up. But I think with better communication, we could mitigate that. And Dana's going to work on that with the bridge people. It could interfere with debris cleanup. But again, we're up to over 80% on debris cleanup on Captiva. And that's going to be even higher by the time we get to January 2nd. It's not going to interfere with utilities because we're already there. Security, Mike Zawicki thinks we have it under control and we have the resources to control it. The looky looks, it's always an issue. And I don't know if we should be terribly concerned about that, other than it's an annoyance. So I guess where I come down, I understand and empathize with people's concerns and fears. They're real, but our islands have been closed for 3 months. And I think the balance leads towards opening on January 2nd if we meet the benchmarks, which Dana seems to suggest we are. I think the curfew has to be adjusted, maybe to make it 11 to 6, or maybe have some exceptions that we talked about for restaurants who have employees that have to return after the second seating of a restaurant. And finally, what Jay said is correct. If there's a serious problem occurs, we can always go back to hurricane passes. So I guess where I come down, and I wrote this out. This may not be a popular view with some of my friends and residents, and we could be wrong, but I think it's the way we should go at this time.
I think that's a great summary, David. I like it. Does anybody else have a comment? Would it make sense for the panel to write a letter to Dana? Yeah, go ahead, Linda.
Well, I was impressed with the objective view they were taking and how well they thought through the problem, and that it wasn't just, okay, now's the time to do it. I also thought they were extremely reasonable as to what are the factors. And so I think supporting what they are doing is, in my opinion, the right thing, although I like keeping everyone off the island.
Yes, I agree.
One other thing that I think and I think they've done it before in the past, is again, the signage prior to coming on the island, way out there, stating that, hey, the beaches are closed. And I remember when Sanibel's beaches were closed, and probably you remember too, Bob, and Sir Mike Zawicki did, when Sanibel beaches were closed, we had this inundation of people, trying to cram onto the beaches of Captiva. So as long as they state that Sanibel and Captiva beaches are closed, it may be somewhat of a deterrent to keep away the looky-loos. That would be my advice. I think that changing the curfew is probably more important than anything else. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to discuss after this about, should we be looking to try to open our beaches even though we keep all the parking lots closed? I don't know the answer. I'd like to hear what everybody thinks.
Well, my beach will be open to our guests and those people who we allow to park there. But there will be restrictions.
Well, except we're not, the Department of Health says we're not supposed to be putting people, our beaches are not considered open from a health department standpoint.
Interesting, the doctor who was here with the group, he swam every day he went swimming in the Gulf. So he felt it was, it was cleansed enough. But again, I would bow to the health department and see what they say as far as any bacterial.
I think we could get people to come. I don't know. It seems like from a community standpoint that the beaches are very important to us. And even if we're not bringing on day trippers, I think from the residents and from the rental perspective, it would be good to have a statement about the safety of our beaches for us.
Linda, are you saying the beaches there's no swimming? They don't recommend swimming, or just don't even go on the beach?
I'm a little unclear. I think they say they don't recommend being in the water.
Yeah, but people can walk the beach and shell and yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So we have a motion on the floor. I think we should vote on that. And if you want to talk about, if anybody has any opinions about the beaches or the swimming, I'd like.
Well, I don't think we've made a motion yet. I was going to suggest that someone make a motion saying that we should write a letter of support to Dana Souza on his plan to, reopen on January 2nd or whatever other time, the council sees fit.
Yeah. All right. I'll second it, if that's a motion.
Well, I can't make the motion. Somebody has to make it.
I'll move that and you can second.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Are all in favor? Raise your hand.
All right.
Any opposed? Okay, Ken, would you craft a letter, stating that, and then, let me see it, and then I'll tell you to go ahead and send it over my signature.
Sure. We also had a couple of audience comments about
Oh,
beaches.
yeah.
Not about the causeway, but about the beaches, basically saying they're not safe, there may be debris in the water, other things in there. And to clarify what Linda said, there have been, Department of Health has been measuring, there's been some enterococtus, but not a lot. There has just been warnings about Vibrio and debris. But nobody's measuring that to say, this area has a lot, this area doesn't. They're just warning that could be present.
Do we have debris in our Do we have debris in our water? I haven't seen it, but I haven't.
No, I haven't. No.
Well, I'm assuming there's some sort of a problem because Sanibel's going to be hiring somebody to rake and sift their beaches, which is something that Sanibel has never done. So they must feel like there's a lot of loose debris. I think not from the stuff that washed back off the island when the houses got overwashed. It brought things back out to the beach. Now, whether that's the case on Captiva, don't know, but Sanibel's acting on it.
Yeah. Maybe there's more house debris on Sanibel than on Captiva, but I haven't noticed any.
I didn't notice any.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a way we could get any kind of official statement or.
I think we should be able to get an official statement either from the Department of Health or Florida DEP or somebody can, and if we can get something official, we can put it on the website. But
That's Captiva specific, not for up.
Linda, you may want to talk to the Aptum surveyors and see what they saw since they were on the beach when they were doing some of this.
And they
Now
were
that won't be official, but at least it's somebody who's been looking at the sand.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
and the water too, because the beaches goes down 13 feet or something as to what they look at.
right, whatever.
Cold.
Leave that aside. I think that there's got to be a DEP and a Department of Health official evaluation of the beaches on Sanibel and Captiva or on Captiva. And if it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. But I think we should those are the two official sources, DEP and Department of Health. And we should just see if in fact there is something that's been issued.
I've checked the Department of Health. Right now, all they're doing is water testing. They don't look at sand, but we can check DEP.
Okay, do they have on the water testing, do they have an advisory?
No, they've said that there have been elevated levels of enterococtus in a couple of their testing spots. I think Turner might have been the last one or Bowman's might have had a moderate, not dangerous. So they are back to their weekly or semi-weekly testing, and we can certainly put that out there. But they don't look at sand at the quality of the sand.
Well, I don't think we should be giving it based on what what we observe or et cetera, as a panel or panel members, I think we should just avail the public of the official information if we can get it. And that
Yeah.
would, and that would be DEP or Department of Health, Ken, whatever you can find, and just put it up,
Okay.
keep it updated. I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we ought to do that. Ken, if you could just
Yeah.
find, whatever the recommendation is, about the water quality and safety of beaches. And then Linda, maybe you defer until, say, February 1st, the question on opening the parking lots. Till then, do you see what the traffic impacts are and everything of, people coming over?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does
That's
that make sense?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
still back to the debris in the beach. Can we request somebody to come look at our beach if nobody, rather than the blanket statements?
When you're talking about the beach, you're talking about on the dry beach or under the water, Linda?
Dry beach, I guess.
Well, if you're talking about the dry beach, I would think that's within the jurisdiction of CEPD to make a determination whether those beaches are okay as they are or whether there needs to be further work done. And I would guess that Bob, Linda, and John, and Daniel, and the rest of the would take
I
that
can-
upon
I can
themselves to do
That question a little bit. The vulnerability assessment that we perform for the beach assessment is strictly for sand loss within the profile of the constructed beach. They're not looking for debris or anything like that. So we don't have that information. If the county may be deciding to do the work and is taking on the burden of the work,
Or do we just assume that it's okay since we don't see anything?
Mm-hmm.
I no, because a visual assessment like that isn't reliable.
Oh, people, or is
I may be out of place here, but it seems to me, I understand what John is saying, that Aptum is not in a position to determine debris, that they're determining what we need to do for beach renourishment and to recoup what we've lost. But Bob, you're the chair of CPD at this point, and Linda, you're on it. It just seems to me, given the budget that we all pay to CEPD, it just seems that it makes sense because you're closest to this issue than anybody else. It makes sense for CEPD to figure out how to determine whether the existing beach is safe for people to walk on or play on or whatever. And if they need to contact the county to figure out how best to ascertain that information, that makes sense too. But it seems to me this is clearly within the purview of CEPD more than any other agency or organization we have on Captiva. So I basically I'm asking that you figure out a way to resolve that.
But Bob, maybe we can talk about it Thursday and figure out something, if you're there. So, John, oh, Bob, are you there?
Yes, sorry. So mute.
So maybe we should talk about Thursday?
That's fine. I caught the tail end of that, so I stepped out of the room. So yeah, circle back with me, Linda.
Okay, I will, but it's basically, the beach is our responsibility. So we need to figure out how to say if it's safe or not, or what to do about it if it isn't.
If I may, real quick, that's something that we would defer to the Department of Health and their disclosure of
John,
what's safe.
let us talk inside the CEPD on Thursday and decide what to do. Okay, John?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, I guess that we're going to move on now to voting in new panel members. Linda, can you give a summary of where we are and what we need to vote on today?
Yes, let me just get the right notes. Okay, we've been talking about this at most of the recent panel meetings. In summary, there are 5 panel positions that are open, 2 of which the panel has to vote on for the members. The other memberships are done by the CPOA and the CCA. The CPOA has nominated Sandy Stillwell and Marguerite Maville, so they will be the members, the new members there, or the continuing. And from the CCA, it's Ann Brady. The current members that the panel nominees are, the panel has two positions. They're currently filled by John Jensen and Tony Lappy. There are 3 additional people who have volunteered wonderfully to be considered for those positions. They are Sarah McClure, Bob Weissman, and Chris Leadham. We have a nominating committee who has looked at all of these 3 as well as the other 2. And we were very impressed by the people volunteering to become members of the panel. Nevertheless, the recommendation from the nominating committee is to renominate John Jensen and Tony Lappy, and that is our recommendation to the panel.
Right, and that recommendation was made, previously, and it's up to us now to vote on that. Before we, vote on it, I'm very appreciative of the 3 applicants that we received. They all seem eminently qualified. And, should the panel vote to accept the nominating committee's recommendation today, I will make sure I reach out to those other 3 people and encourage them to become involved in other panel work or CEPD work. And then they would be considered again the next time we have an opening open, on the panel. So,
so if it's appropriate, I would like to make a motion that I would like to move that the panel approve the recommendation of the nominating committee for John Jensen and Tony Lappy to be on the panel.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Hold on, can I just ask one question?
Yes.
The 3 other applicants, and I think, it's very important for perception of the panel to make sure we have a, true representation. Where were these people located on the island? Can you tell us that, Linda?
Well, Sarah McClure is from the resort, from South Seas.
Okay.
I don't remember, I'm sorry, where the other 2 are located.
Bob Weissman lives on the Gold Coast, and the
Chris-
other gentleman, I'm not sure.
Chris Leadham, they live in Sarasota, but he has 2 homes in South Seas. And is here
In South Seas,
regularly.
okay.
Okay.
I just, I'm just thinking out loud, I've served on this, and first of all, I very much enjoyed it. And I'm very appreciative that we got appointed, but I'm just wondering, as a panel, how do you all feel about this? Is it, I don't want it to become kind of an old boys circuit, that you serve while you're in again, and you do want some turnover, and I still feel comfortable because I have people who have been in business, whether it's John or Bob Walter here on the island, understand that. So it's not that I don't want to serve, don't misunderstand me. I'd be happy to serve, but at the same time, I'm sure that the committee went through that vetting process or not.
Well, what we thought of, one is you want people representing our business community as well as residents. Another one is we have a variety of where people live with different interests, some of whom live in South Seas, some of whom live in the Village area, some who lives between water stretch, some who lives in the Gold Coast. And with all of that and looking at the other nominations made by the other groups, what we were trying to do is balance those out. We also wanted to, for people who have served and have been active, we also wanted to recognize that. So, which doesn't mean we don't want to pull in these other people into other things in the community. They're very capable, qualified people that can have a lot to offer to Captiva.
Okay. I just wanted, if there anybody's on the participant thing listening in, I just think that it's good that we keep an open mind, and obviously the committee, and Linda, I applaud you. That's not an easy job to try to figure this whole thing out, this puzzle, but I just brought it up. I'm happy to serve, but I just wanted to understand the process. That's all.
Right. I think, Tony, I appreciate your comment, but both you and John are proven contributors, to the panel. And you're available to serve another 3-year term. And I will do my best to reach out to the other 3 applicants and, make sure that their applications are highly valued, and we would like to find a pathway to get them into community service, for Captiva, and they would be considered again for our next panel opening.
Certainly for committees that we need
Yes.
people on committees.
Yeah, we need people on committees now. There are opportunities for these people to contribute.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Tony.
Okay, so I think we had a motion. Did we have a second? I forgot.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor of reappointing Tony and John, raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Okay, next up is Ken's compensation. Let me find my notes on that. Okay, I want to bring up Ken Gooderham's compensation. Ken is currently being retained for $1,750 a month. His last increase was 2 years ago. I want to recommend to the panel that we increase Bob's or Ken's pay by 25% from which works out to he's now making $21,000. It would be an increase to $26,400 on an annual basis, or an increase of $5,400. I know that's a very sizable increase, but I think Ken has done an incredibly remarkable job through this whole recovery and how he has handled everything. He's enormously valuable, to the panel. And I want to give him a raise that, is a very solid endorsement of all the contributions that he's been making to the panel. And, to say it with a big exclamation point, people could say, why 25 instead of 20 or something like that, that it's judgment. But I just feel that Ken deserves a very sizable increase of $5,400 a year. And the other factor is he's nearing retirement, and I want to do everything possible to make it very difficult for him to retire from his current position, with the panel.
JP, could you just repeat what his annual salary is right now?
It's 21,000.
Okay.
Or 1,750 a month.
Okay.
And
Well,
I'm recommending that he go to 2,200 a month, which would be 26,400.
Okay. You and I, haven't discussed this at all.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing these numbers basically for the first time.
Right, you all are.
I'm focusing on them for the first time. I really appreciate what you're saying, but I got to say something about this. It seems to me Ken is worth $30,000 a year. I mean, I have to believe that. I mean, I'm fairly familiar with what people are getting in the nonprofit world these days. And I'm fairly familiar with what administrators get. And Ken has done, I mean, when we had this hurricane hit, Ken was in Paris. And he put together our communication plan and created the opportunity for us to educate and provide information to our community. He did this from Paris while he was on vacation.
Yes,
It was an ongoing task that he had to deal with challenges with the internet and challenges with all the issues that we faced and he faced. And I got to say, I understand he's part-time and I understand he's a contractor, but I can't for the life of me think, given what his contribution is and continues to be, and maybe Ann Brady can help on this because she's familiar with these numbers also. I can't imagine that he is not worth at $30,000 a year for what he does for this community in this panel.
yeah, I agree with your comment. I'm guilty of looking at what he was being paid now instead of starting from a blank slate, or a clean sheet and say, well, if we were going to go out and hire somebody of Ken's caliber, what would we pay? And I think that's probably a better rationale than what I have. So I would be very supportive of $30,000.
Yeah, I agree. And define part-time, because every time I needed Ken, I've got a hold of Ken. So
yeah, same for me.
That's been my experience also.
I would also like, I am totally supportive. Is $30,000 the right number? I don't know. It may be even more based upon what I understand in the not-for-profits, or is a bonus for what he has done during the hurricane appropriate as well, not instead of, but as well. When he was in Paris, he was typing in all of those updates into his cell phone. I can't imagine.
Yeah, well, I'm receptive to that too. The problem with a bonus is it doesn't have retention value, but it certainly.
Oh,
yeah.
No. So
yes, right. My background is.
Jay, I think we need Ann's comment.
Yes, Ann.
Yeah, I think $30,000 is a deal.
Yeah.
That job would be full-time. I would say if you're comparing yourselves to national organizations, not just necessarily Florida-based, which I think SCCF does and the Shell Museum, it would easily be a $90,000 job.
Yes.
Yeah. And so for-profit, nonprofit, I don't think that necessarily matters. Also, what we wouldn't necessarily get in a new person in that position is Ken's breadth of experience.
Yes.
He knows all the players. He's a good writer. He has contacts. He is, as everyone has said, he's always available. There has never been a time, I don't think, when anyone has contacted Ken and he hasn't said, sure, I'll do that, and then gets back to you. He's also, even though I have the title of being the chair of development, Ken is the one who writes the letters. Right. I and David will edit the letters. Ken is the one who's calling the boat, from when we're going to do the welcome back cruise. Ken knows all the people. Ken's getting the refreshments for free and all of that. And so we all help Ken in many respects, but Ken really pulls the load. So I think $30,000 is, we're getting a bargain.
Okay.
What do you think the number should be?
I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I guess, I guess we'd really have to think about like doing a job description and if we put it out there, what would the market be? How many hours are we expecting? So I don't know. I mean, to just throw out a number, I'm not sure I'm prepared to do that.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we make it 30,000 and then agree to review it again next year and try to get some comps and so on, and make a more intelligent recommendation then.
Jay, I would recommend that you form a compensation committee and have that committee, like you say, a small group, 3 of our, I mean, that's what we do in our company for, we have a compensation committee for, this type of issue, because they can go out and do some research and figure out. And of course, it's not national, but it's local. Everything, there's a
Right.
lot to be considered, but I don't think it should be all on your shoulders. I think it should be a committee thing. And that's just a suggestion on my part.
I think that's a good suggestion. Anne, would you take that on?
Yep. Mhm.
How do you all feel about doing 30,000 right now? And then at the next review point, have, the compensation committee, do a thorough evaluation of this and
What do y'all think about a bonus as well? You don't like it, Tony? No?
Personally, I don't. I mean, things happen in a job, he steps up. I mean, this is the kind of guy he is. I mean, if you want to do a bonus, I mean, I'm not saying you couldn't, but that gets into a point where sometimes in certain situations that I've been through it, that all of a sudden come year end, everybody's looking at their bonus. Why am I not getting a bonus, or it's not big enough? So I think if we can push the 30,000 through without any problems, I do that. And then again, the compensation committee can review that type of thing.
Yeah, I would make a motion that we increase Ken's salary or compensation to $30,000 annually, starting immediately. And that the compensation committee does its work and comes back to the panel. And whenever it's completed, there's no time frame. Whenever it's completed, in other words, we don't have to wait another year, but whenever it's completed, come back and then we will reassess the salary based on the recommendation of the compensation.
I agree with that.
Agree with that.
All right, so that we have that motion. Can someone second it?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Ken, you're now making 30,000 a year. And you're going to form a compensation committee and try to do a more rational based recommendation on what Ken's compensation should be. We're
Okay.
not under a specific time frame for that, but whenever,
Yeah.
you can do it.
Yep.
and get
Sure.
it done,
And
we
if
fill it
anyone's
out.
interested in serving on the committee, just email me. Otherwise, I'll email you. Yes, well, congratulations, Ken, and thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, next on the agenda. The budget for 2023. Ken, do you want to take us through that briefly?
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen because it's a little messy. You'll notice some odd numbers here, and it's because of the way we've been having to sit on some money. So we have $60,000 that the county has given us to pay for a Sanibel study that we have had in the bank. We are expecting another 45,000 perhaps this year or right after the first of the year. And then we have the directed donations that people have provided to be paid over a number of years, which is why that number changes every year. We don't have, you as a panel don't have access to those funds until they're made available. And then obviously the county money are earmarked specifically for the Sanibel study. So that's why we have annual revenues versus total revenues, because there's money that's not accessible to you. The 23 numbers look as bad as they do because it's a worst case scenario. It's not going to be that bad. For example, we're expecting that Sanibel will want to get reimbursed for their 2 studies, which we already will have the money for. So that's not going to be a problem. And then we have other numbers in here that are based on a worst case scenario of contracts we have existing that probably won't need to be paid, but we need to acknowledge that they exist, like the Johnson Engineering contract. So the bottom line is it's a very red number for 23, but we have the cash reserves for that and our cash position is good. What I was asking for this, knowing that we weren't going to have final numbers until we heard from the county and this other discussion occurred, Is there anything else that you see we need to be spending money on this year that I need to include so that I can bring you back a complete budget to approve in January? And also, of course, do you have any question on this? Like we have, depending on when we return to live meetings, that will impact some things. Fundraising events will be impacted by the ability to actually meet and have the resources to do things. So
obviously the administration line needs to change.
Obviously.
So Ken, what you're basically showing us is that we're just for the budget, leave aside cash on hand, but for the budget for 2023, we're running a deficit of about what, $30,000?
Roughly, yes. A lot of it will depend on when Sanibel wants to be reimbursed.
Well, yes, but Sanibel, assuming we reimburse it all, right? And
right,
equals the expense, which is the 105,000. So that's a wash. So in terms of what we need to do at least is raise another $30,000 to end up basically without a deficit for 2023, right?
Correct. And that's also assuming that, some of those expenses will probably not be fulfilled. Like, I don't think we'll be doing enough work with Johnson to require the full 13,000 to be paid. But yes,
it's actually not 30, it's 36,000 because of the change in the administration number.
Okay.
So it's about 36,000. So, but that's assuming we did, what do you have for fundraising for 2023?
I'm hoping that we could do at least one event later in the year for $20,000, and we would do a solicitation that would raise around 40.
So what we're talking about in order, so that's 40, that's 60. So we need in order to break even, we need about $100,000 in income coming in from our fundraising, right?
Well, not that bad, because if we could bring in 60 from the fundraising, and if we took out the Sanibel study, that would bring our expenses down to about 64. So that's assuming all those numbers would be the same. So it's not that bad. If we could do $60,000 in fundraising, we should be able to at least break even. Because if you take out the Sanibel reimbursement is 105,000, take that out of the 174, you're already down to 59.
Right, but am I misreading something? The 105 for the studies, right? Those are the studies.
Right.
And that doesn't include the 45?
That will, assuming we'll get the 45 either the end of this year or next year, we already have the 60, so that's a wash.
But isn't the 45 included in the 105 on top in the annual?
Yeah, but I'm saying if you took those out, if you just did the 20 and 40 for fundraisers and donations, and you look at all of our other expenses besides the 105, we're about to break even. And that's why I want to redo the budget, because I did not make this as clear as I should have.
It's not clear. It looks like the 45 is in there twice on the line, but it probably isn't.
No, see, we're assuming the revenue will be 20, 40, and 45 for 105 plus the $40,000 in escrow donations.
It might be clearer, Ken, if you just took out the Sanibel projects, because they're a wash, aren't they?
I need to put them someplace else and get them out of the line item budget, because they are confusing.
They are confusing.
I think that's confusing it. I mean, those are a wash.
Right.
Right.
So I will redo that part of it. And then also, if you see, we'll make the change in the administration. Is there anything else that you see we should be planning for? And I know a lot of the projects.
The Johnson Engineering project, is that money actually going to be spent next year, do we think?
Is that money we owed or money that's yet to be spent? Yeah.
That's money we owe on the contract, but they haven't billed for it. So we may never get billed for that.
Okay. But it technically we owe it.
Yes. Just like technically we still owe Mars Depew some money, but I've let that go away because they basically stopped working out here, period.
Right. Okay, I see what you did. So what you're basically saying, if we could raise $60,000 in fundraising we might be able to break even. That's what you're saying.
And that's, still assuming some things like we will still have stormwater committee costs, but those are probably high. We will do some development, obviously. The website may need some work, may not. We really don't know. Right now, it's toddling along, but we may need to look at it, decide if we want to make some changes. And then obviously we have insurance, and I'm assuming we won't be doing the golf tournament because there will be no golf course.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you see anything else, send me an email. Otherwise, I'll refigure this with the new numbers and to break out the Sanibel stuff so it's not throwing the numbers off. And I'll give you something you can approve in January.
Well, the other thing too is, we have a historical rate of response to our solicitation letter. But I think there's a good probability we might get a much more favorable response to our, solicitation letter than what we've had in the past. I know a number of people have commented to me how appreciative they are of all the work that, we've done. So, we may get, a response to our solicitation letter that exceeds what we're accustomed to.
That would be a nice problem to have, but I don't want to
Yeah.
assume it because I know a
Yeah,
lot of people are
that's
also
true.
facing some struggles. They've had to do
That's
rebuilding,
true
and
also.
so I'd rather be conservative in that.
When
since we really don't know.
the solicitation letter going to go out?
Well, Anne, do you have?
Well, first of all, I want to say, Ken, congratulations on your strategy for us discussing your compensation prior to looking at the budget.
Completely accidental, trust me.
Yeah. Well, the letter is ready to go, and typically we send it out in early December, right after Thanksgiving. So it can go out at any time. What we really wanted to do is just get a consensus from the panel that we do want a letter to go out. It certainly can be shared with all of you if you'd like to see it, but it's a very thoughtful letter that summarizes the kind of collective experience of Hurricane Ian, understanding that everyone has gone through a lot, but also talks about the panel's commitment to the work that it has done and the work it continues to do, particularly in terms of communication, coordination, and collaboration, and how, in addition to the projects that are ongoing, the panel, of course, has taken this on and just wants to be as proactive as possible. So we've been heartened by some unsolicited gifts, very generous gifts from community members who have just, I think, understood that and have the capacity to be able to help and have done so. And so I think, as with all fundraising, I mean, you want to provide people who have the capacity to be able to help and to invite them to do that. And certainly if this is not a time that people feel they can, then they just disregard it. So I think it's, as I said, a very thoughtful letter that takes into understanding what everyone's gone through.
And I believe our thoughts are to send it to the email list first, because we've been able to grow the list considerably with the people who are interested in keeping up with storm information. And that would allow us to get it out very quickly and then do some follow-up by mail.
And the other thing I think is that since we have stormwater and wastewater projects that are in process, we may find ourselves in a position to have to contribute to some of that work. So as a panel. And so I think what we may want to do is in a miscellaneous item on the expense side to budget some amount of money that would assist our partners, be it Sanibel or the county, in terms of some of the important work we're doing with the important projects, the long-term projects. So I don't want the community to think that we're flush when in fact we may have obligations to keep our projects moving forward on certain key projects. So maybe if we can put a miscellaneous expense item that might relate to either sewer or stormwater or some of the other major issues, we should have that in there so that we don't miss that opportunity for fundraising for those events, for those projects.
And what figure would you feel comfortable with for that?
I don't know, maybe 30 grand or something like that.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I have no idea either, but I think at some point, given the pressures on Sanibel and the county to fund other things in the recovery, and yes, we're trying to do as much fundraising as we can, and there should be a lot of state and federal money available. I just feel like for us to keep the projects going, we may have to grease the wheels at certain points, because some people may be hard pressed to come up with certain miscellaneous funds. So that's what I'm suggesting.
Well, and the other thing that gives us an advantage is a lot of time when you're looking at reimbursables, the timing of that is uncertain. So Sanibel may be sitting on $2 million of money that's FEMA is supposed to pay them, but it may take them 2 years to get it. So if we have a little bit of ability to help throw some money at a project that we are supporting, that may be smart. You're right.
Right. And just like we do with the iguanas, we may have to we're laying out 25,000, but we're going to get it back. But at least, but who knows when exactly? That's all.
Okay. Any other suggestions for the budget? And I'll go ahead and get this ready for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the meeting schedule for next year. Did you want to say anything about that, Ken? Or, I mean, you're just saying we're going to continue to meet on the second Tuesday of the month. Is that correct?
That's correct. And CEPD's already approved their schedule. And for the most part, except for 1 or 2 months, we line up, which is inevitable just because of the structure.
Okay.
Hey, Ken, Ken, good. How many people are on our email list now?
930, I think.
Oh, okay. Great, thank you.
Wow.
Mm.
I had no idea it'd grown that much.
Yeah, we added about 120 people.
Okay, Captiva Drive revegetation and the shoulder project. Where this, I'm not sure where this was before the hurricane, came up. I think we were trying to understand, how much latitude we had on each side of the present roadway to create a bike path. And I think we determined that we had, at least 5 or 6 feet on each side of the bike path. But I don't know where, what's happened since then. The only point I want to make right now is that, one of the chief obstacles to the bike path project was, people have, plantings that would have to be destroyed to put in a bike path. And it appears to me now like all those plantings are destroyed, and at the very least, we ought to try to do something to make sure that people do not plant back within 2 feet of the shoulder, which I believe, David, maybe you can help me out here, is what the current code is on that.
Right. The current code says that no vegetation shall encroach into, onto, or over Captiva Drive or its paved shoulder below the height of 8 feet and a setback of at least 2 feet from the edge of the pavement shall be maintained at all times for all vegetation below the height of 8 feet. So what that means in English is that where the pavement, it would be 2 feet where there's no, on either side of the pavement, on both sides of the road, where there should be no vegetation planted for 2 feet. And there should be nothing hanging over the roadway or the bicycle or the shoulder or that 2 feet, which is less than 8 feet. So people don't get hit in the head when they're riding a bicycle or walking. But that's the current code. So at the minimum, leaving aside the bike path or anything else, at a minimum, we should be advising our landscapers and our property owners along the Tween Water stretch, Captiva Drive, and in the village, that the current code requires them not to plant within 2 feet of the pavement. And we have not asked the county, and in fact, we have spoken to the county about in the past, not coming in with a machete and basically on their own maintaining that 2 feet, because we didn't want somebody coming in with too heavy a hand. But given the situation we're in now, I think it behooves us to educate our property owners to at least maintain that 2 feet from the pavement without vegetation, because that vegetation, if it's planted right next to the roadway, within a very short period of time is over the roadway. And then people are riding their bicycles or walking in the street. So this is something we should take advantage of. It's an opportunity. Just make sure that current code is maintained. I believe, frankly, if we really did have that 2 feet and we really protected the shoulder from vegetation, that would make it much safer to walk and to ride at this point. Whether we expand that further, 1 feet, 2 feet, 3 feet, whatever that Ken Gill has been working on, that's a different issue as far as I'm concerned. But this issue of just maintaining and enforcing the existing code or self-enforcing as a community, I think is very important. So Ken, I would ask, and this is Jay raises, I think if there's a way we can inform all the property owners and the landscapers of this particular code provision, I think it would be really helpful. And then at that point, the county could just maintain that.
It may also be a good opportunity to remind the property owners that the right of way is not theirs to plant. I mean, they can put plants there, but the county always has the option of coming in and removing them if there's a health and safety issue. So I think that's a good reinforcement to say, keep it away 2 feet away, but if you go into the right of way at all, it is at risk.
Yep.
Well,
you have the perfect vehicle at this point. I think everybody is reading what you write, Ken. And so if we could put it into the panel updates, it's a good, it's an opportunity.
Maybe it would be better, instead of just putting it into the update, to have a mailing of this, with that being the only subject.
Yeah.
And that being sharing the code about vegetation along Captiva Drive.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay. But to be clear though, this is a way to make walking, running, and biking on Captiva Drive safer without expanding the road. Is that kind of what we're doing here?
Well, I think we're putting that marker down now and leaving in abeyance the issue of whether or not we should pursue, adding a bike lane.
Right. Or expanding, yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the problem we face right now is, at least from my discussions with DOT, and this is before Ian, they have no budget. They would be happy to do whatever we want if we can give them money. But to expect the county DOT to pay for it is not happening in the near term. And after Ian, it's definitely not happening in the near term, because they will have their resources stretched very thin,
right.
and they're going to lose a lot of property tax income countywide.
Well, then this is really our only choice to do it, right? This is really the only strategy we have right now.
Unless we can figure out a funding mechanism.
Well, we're talking about two different things. I think Ken's talking about the possibility of a bicycle path, but what we were talking about before is not going to. The county does have the funds, and they will enforce, if we ask them to, the 2 foot barrier beyond because that's in the current code. That's being the driveway. But I think rather than enforcing anything, I think we just have to educate people and the landscapers to understand that's the current code. And then we can move on from there at some point in terms of whether people want a bicycle path. We know there's some people that really want it, and we know there's some people that really don't. But I think the issue at this point is the 2 feet, which is currently in the code, should be enforced.
Yeah.
That would make a difference. There's no question in my mind.
Jay, to reply to David's comments and Ken's, I struggle with giving people an option. If they plant they have to recognize that they're planning on counting property and it could be removed, because you could be right back in the situation that we faced pre-Ian. So my recommendation for the board to consider is to go to the county and say, we want you to enforce this. However, we want you to, when you come in to finish all the devastation projects, to cover those 2 areas, those 2-foot areas on both sides with some similar covering, whether it be stone or sand or whatever the product should be. Otherwise, we're going to face the same issue 10 years from now.
I don't know. Can we get the county to do something like that? I mean, certainly we can say that, folks, we're going to start enforcing the code that you can't plant within 2 feet of the roadway. So as you're re-landscaping, be aware of that. There's not going to be any more, planting up to the edge of the roadway.
And I would be a little hesitant to put certain materials along the side of the shoulder because they could create more of a problem than a solution. Like if
Yeah.
you were to put in sand, that's going to be on the shoulder pretty quick.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And if you plant something, 2 feet isn't very far. If you're putting plants in 2 feet away from the edge of the pavement, in 6 months, it's going to be growing into the bike path too.
Yeah, that's my point, John.
So,
I think if you leave this open to all of us, we're all going to plant back to where we were.
2 feet, yeah.
I'm going to cover that 2 foot.
So I think the goal will be to keep it trimmed back 2 feet and plant at least 2 feet, but then
John,
keep it
you're
trimmed.
right, but I think you need a consistent product. I don't know what that product is to cover that space. Because I think Mike's comment has some validity to it. If you did this could satisfy everybody and not have to go through widening that road. Because I know Mike's area is extremely vulnerable to that landscaping drop off they have down there, and that could be an engineering nightmare to try to reinforce that road.
No, I agree. It's probably going to make it a lot safer, but even if you put in sand or gravel and your plants are 2 feet away, it's going to grow over that material.
Yeah, but doesn't the code say not the planting, but the plant itself? I mean, so you don't plant 2 feet away. You have to plant so that further than that, so that the branches will not encroach.
Okay.
Or they will be taken off. I thought that was the intent of the code language, David.
It is.
Yeah.
The setback of at least 2 feet from the edge of the pavement shall be maintained at all times for all vegetation below the.
So maybe a recommendation would be to plant where the growth does not come within 2 feet of the pavement.
Yes.
But you have to have a consistent product the entire way, or everybody's going to use something else to fill that area up. And I think it'd be dangerous to walk or ride on.
Yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah.
Well, I'm stumped as to what to do.
Well, I think you just have the plantings. I mean, the plantings before were coming right into the path. So if they're just trimmed back, what's it gonna be? Just sand or regular dirt along the edge of the bike path, which I don't see a problem with that.
It's
Well,
going to
the
be a
sand
issue.
will take down bikers.
Yeah.
Sand is not a good idea for bikers.
Grass, just do grass like they do on Sandcap Road.
Yeah, I think it has to be grass because anything else is going to wash out when there's a heavy rain. I mean, dirt is just going to wash away, mulch,
Yeah, if you
gravel.
can't get asphalt, you're going to have to do some kind of a planting.
Would have to just be.
Gravel's not good.
Yeah.
What do you think, Mike, coming from your end of Gold Coast?
To your point, the road is quite a bit higher than the lots on either side of the road, just because it has a gradual climb to the bridge. So any widening could be a little bit tough or dangerous even, but I think grass on either side of the shoulder would kind of be the way to go. You know, it'll give you a barrier between trees or anything that's going to, cause cyclists to be, having to push into the road. That's one of the big things that, you've got to avoid these trees. So I think if we put down 2-3 feet of grass, that'll keep it from becoming dirt or mud on the road, and it'll kind of keep a low profile on off the shoulder.
I think the DOT would have some insight into this.
Yeah.
I mean, in all fairness I remember the discussions that took place. I mean, I just read the language of it, but the intent of this was to make sure under all conditions that there was no vegetation encroaching on the shoulder. Right? So the idea of 2 feet, and this was the DOT at the time and all kinds of people, the idea of 2 feet is that would prevent that. So if you had a branch from a vegetation coming over 6 inches into the 2 feet, it's not the end of the world. The idea, before this code provision was passed, was that we had all kinds of vegetation growing over and on the shoulder.
Yeah.
And so this 2 feet was to prevent that from happening. You want the shoulder to be completely cleared for people to walk and pedal and whatever. And there's not the intent that 2 feet next to the shoulder, next to the pavement, was going to be used by a bicycler or somebody walking. It was just to prevent anything from coming on that shoulder.
Yeah.
And do you recall, Dave, from back then, what the suggestion was what you would do with those 2 feet?
I don't know. No, there was no suggestion, because it's what I was trying to say before, maybe not very clearly. The idea was to make sure you let all landscapers and property owners know that their vegetation cannot go over that shoulder, and therefore the code was 2 feet. If you're going to plant something, it better be 2 feet back, because very quickly it's going to be over the shoulder. And I think that was the intent. So the idea is just to cut back always 2 feet so that there's no growth that will then impose over the roadway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm not, I guess in a perfect world, you could have vegetation up to 6 inches from the shoulder, and that would meet sort of the intent of this code. The problem is, if you don't maintain the 2 feet, Ken Gill is right, it's going to be very quickly over. So this was just a way to keep the vegetation off the shoulder.
Now, we do have a couple of comments from the audience. One is suggesting make sure the people know what the codes are, because they may not be familiar with them. And the other was looking at grass or other low growing perennials as a way of filling that 2 feet so that nothing else goes in there. And, we can look at that, and I can talk to DOT and see what their recommendation is. I'm guessing they'd love grass, because it would give, their concern is always about giving cars a place to be able to get off the road. And so grass works fine for them.
Mm.
The question is, how do we get it done?
Yeah.
Well, guys, we're at 12:25. Maybe the best thing to do is, John, you sound like you know a lot about this, and Ken, you've been working on the shoulder project.
Yep.
Maybe could the two of you, over the prior to the next panel meeting, study this and come up with a recommendation?
Yep.
I don't think anybody's going to be planning in the next month. I don't think.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'll give
What
it.
we
I'd like
want
to
to
get-
achieve is we want to make sure that as everybody replants, we don't repeat the problem that we have now.
Yeah. Yeah.
We want to maintain that shoulder
Yeah.
and have it.
Jay,
fair.
I'd like to get Mike on that committee also. I'd value his opinion.
I mean, Mike Lanigan?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Mike is going off the panel, but he can certainly be on the committee if you would
Not
do
so
that.
fast, Mike.
Ken, can you inquire with DOT and just get an idea, their suggestion of if they have one of what they would recommend for that 2 foot?
I can give it a try, sure.
And
Yes,
if they have a budget to do it?
That'll be a harder answer for them to give, but I'll try that too.
Okay.
I think the question that I would like you to ask them is how they best would enforce that 2 feet is part of the code. And what they recommend the enforcement mechanism be. That
Okay.
they-
Yep. And you want to keep the look of Captiva, I don't know if a grass strip, is that what we want? Or do you want to keep that natural vegetation look too? So.
Yeah.
I think that,
vegetation look is the problem, right? It's coming onto the road,
No,
it's not safety, so.
I
that's
think
not the answer.
what would fix everything is you just keep it trimmed back off
That's
the
not gonna
pavement,
happen.
off the
It's not gonna
pavement.
happen.
Not trimming your vegetation is not a fact. That is an established fact. That's what people just don't do it, So.
Seems, yeah. No, but we'll look, yeah. I'll be glad to help out, Mike and Ken. So,
Maybe
Okay,
that's.
so we're leaving you guys. Go ahead, David.
Maybe that's what we do with our miscellaneous budget. We hire somebody once a month and just trim it back 2 feet. Every month. I'm being half serious about this. It wouldn't take a lot to just run a very sensitive landscaper down Captiva Drive all the way into the village and to Blind Pass Bridge, just making sure that the vegetation is prettily nicely cut back to make sure it doesn't encroach over the shoulder. That might be doable.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I don't know. I like the idea of, of some solution where people do not replant in such a way that we repeat the problem that we have today.
Mhm.
Hey, we don't have to widen Captiva Drive to make bicycling safe. If we could just, keep vegetation from encroaching.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
I can't imagine any trimming program's gonna accomplish it. I think it needs to be some kind of a planning guideline
Mhm.
for,
Okay.
people to follow.
Okay.
But, all right, but John, you and Ken and Mike are gonna study this
Yeah,
and
yep.
come back, for recommendations at the next panel meeting as to how we should address this.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, David, do you have any comments on panel ordinances?
No, as everybody knows, the county attorney's office is supposed to just send us back their tweaks and changes to the visions of the code. And as soon as I get them, I'll share them with the panel. I
Okay.
do it a couple of weeks ago. I haven't seen them. I know they're overwhelmed with all kinds of other things, so I haven't pushed it, but I'll make sure I get them for the January meeting.
Okay. On wastewater committee update, you all got that when the discussion I had with Dana Sousa. So you know the next steps Captiva or Sanibel has to go through before we can get a final budget, for our project and move on to an MSTBU. So do we have any other committee reports?
Very quickly on stormwater, we're having a
Yes.
meeting tomorrow to review the Kimley Horn proposal and try to finalize that. And then once that is finalized, we will be submitting it for Deepwater Horizon funding into the FDEP.
Right. And again, this is the creating a stormwater drainage plan for the village area.
Correct.
Yes.
And then after we get it submitted, then we are going to be working with the county and our legislative supporters to get it funded.
Okay.
Linda, can I ask you one quick question, Jay? At the CPD meeting yesterday, or before that, you and others had said that we received $250,000, meaning Captiva
Hey, Pasa? Okay, I'll give you an update.
had received
Got
200.
taken away.
Was that taken away?
Yes, let me give you the update. There was $170 million package, which was called local member funding that had passed the legislature. And then it went into the governor's office. And the governor decided he did not want it funded. So there is one administrative thing he had to do, and he did not do it. And so all of that fell apart.
So $250,000 that was earmarked for the phase 2 of the Afton proposal for resilience on the bay side of Captiva has disappeared. Is that right?
Correct. So we now have that disappeared. So there's a new so we're going to be working and resubmitting it. I don't remember all the details for the next legislative session. We believe it does have the support of the legislature, and we're going to be working with the appropriate politicians to get it funded. I don't remember more details at this point, but we have a plan. We're working with our lobbyists on how to get it funded again. Okay.
Yep. Good.
And we may update it based on. There's $100 million that's been earmarked for beach renourishment, for beaches after the hurricane, and there's another pot of money that is being funded. And so we're coming up with the appropriate strategy to try to get it funded again. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Any other project updates?
Jay, a question for David. Could there be an update on the next meeting, David, on what's happening with the legislation on the insurance situation in Florida?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
I understand that's moving into session now.
Yes, I can make sure that happens.
Can you do that, David?
Yeah. And what they're talking about is, for example, right now, insurance company has 90 days to respond to a claim. They're talking about maybe reducing that 90 days to 60 days. There are other issues about whether people can get insurance while a claim is pending. There are a number of insurance issues that relate strictly to Florida. I assume that's what you're talking about, Ken?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
They've had several, the large national insurance companies moved out of insuring for hurricanes, as you know.
Right.
And there's smaller local Florida companies, but some of them have been hurt so bad they may go out of business.
Right. I will take it. I will see what I can find out and make sure we have at least an updated report on that at the January meeting.
Thank you.
Can I make add something to this conversation? It's a little bit, just because we're talking about insurance. I just want to share a personal story that one of my neighbors is experiencing. They need to put on a new roof after the hurricane, but their home is within 600 feet of an active eagle's nest. Now, there have been trucks going up and down Captiva Drive making very loud noises since, whenever they arrived, the middle of October. And I'm sure they're disrupting the eagles' nesting period more so than any roof will. I just, I believe there should be some sort of hardship. It's nothing for us to vote on or even debate, but anybody's willing to offer an opinion. But I don't know how anybody's going to get insurance next year if their roof hasn't been fixed, and to postpone that. By the way, they were denied. The Lee County denied their permit for a new roof. So I don't know what, I discussed this briefly with David. I don't know what they can do or anybody else within this sort of area who need a new roof, and certainly going to need, one, to protect their home, and two, to get insurance. So that's just a hardship that I just want to make you guys aware of. And if you have any suggestions or any comments, I'd love to be able to share them.
Yeah, I had responded to when you told me this the first time, I asked you if you could ask the individual involved for a copy of their permit. Yeah. And I've not received it.
I've not received it either, but it's coming.
Okay, when it comes, I'll make the calls that, at least the contacts I have, to see if there's a workaround and see if there's a way we can deal with it. This is a Captiva resident, this is the panel. So as soon as you get that rejection letter and we know what permit it is, then I'll do what I can, and I'll work with Ken, and we'll see what we can do.
Mike, is there any chance that they're subject to the 50% rule? Because the county's been slowing down on that if they have to evaluate that.
Not at all.
Okay.
Thanks, Ken. That's good. Appreciate that, but no.
I'll just get me the rejection if you can.
I will.
Okay. Do we have any other audience comments or questions we need to respond to?
Nope, we've included all of them.
Okay, I would like to close the meeting by thanking Mike Lanigan for all of his years of service on the panel.
Yeah.
You're going to really be missed, Mike.
Yeah.
We're going to miss his test.
So, yeah. So enjoy your year off. We expect you back on. Yeah.
It's been my pleasure. I've enjoyed it a great deal. And
well, you've been a great panel member. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So thank you. And it's amazing how fast 6 years goes by.
Okay, if nobody
We'll see
has
you on
anything.
Tuesdays in the audience, Mike.
Yeah.
I can't wait till we meet in person again. That'd be great.
Okay, with that, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
All right.
A second. Okay, everybody, thank you.
Adios.
See you
And I'll be in
next
touch.
time.
Happy
Okay.
holidays. All
All
right.
right, bye-bye.
Thank you, Mike.
See you guys.
Bye. Thanks, Mike.